This, you good? Yeah.
I
This
got it.
is the Vision 79 podcast, where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing numbers. Sanders is 40, mine is 39, and we have similar ambition to progress in business and personal growth. Many successful people have started small, just like us, but very few of them have documented their early years. They often say they wish they had, and given we believe in learning lessons from others, we intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish. Today, we'll discuss why being hated isn't always a bad thing, how to self-reflect and know if the hatred is deserved, how to conduct yourself while being hated, and much more. But first, we like to start each episode with a brief update of where we're at in our business and personal lives, so when we look back on these in the future, we can kind of guess where we're at. We haven't recorded in, I think, 2 weeks, so I have a fucking lot. What is your business update?
I got drop shipping is all of my business stuff. I did a bunch of product research in the past couple of weeks. I created a new products page for the new product I'll be running.
What's the new product?
It's a learning card tablet.
Got it.
So it's like the tablet, and you can draw pictures on it, but it comes with a bunch of different cards. You insert them, and it like says the word, or if it's an animal, it says the animal and then makes the animal sound, and then you can like draw and whatever. And
Gotcha.
whatever.
And this is a tool to help you learn how to drop ship?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that'll be available on the site, launching at midnight tonight. So finished up some ads for it. I was up until 5 in the morning last night.
This morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So just finishing up that stuff. Probably got to sleep around 5:30ish, and then I woke up this morning at 9:30. So that was fun.
Awesome.
But yeah, did a bunch of research and decided on that product, recommended to me by my mentor as well. He was like, test this. I saw someone scaling it recently, and so I was like, okay, I'll try it out. But a lot of Canva work, CapCut work, building out the actual page, getting the site up and running properly. I've already gotten 2 sales for the product, even
Cool.
before I've started running ads, just from traffic on the site.
Yeah.
And funny enough, both of the sales, because I can track the traffic and like where they came from, essentially what ad they came from to the site.
Yeah.
Both of the people who selected to buy the tablet originally had clicked on the ad for the gramophone I have, gone to the gramophone, gone to checkout, and then saw my tablet in the bottom menu and the checkout page,
Like, oh, this
decided to delete the gramophone and buy the tablet instead,
Interesting.
which was interesting. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the ads do this coming week. I'm hoping they do well. Of course, always nice to do well, but
You know what's cool about the cards over the gramophone? Doesn't make a ton of noise.
yeah,
So, like, your kid won't bug the shit out of you with them playing with it.
yeah,
So that's a good note.
yeah. It's and it's pretty cute. It comes in pink and blue, and it's like styled like it's like a little dog on the right side, like the
Yeah.
thumb pad and the card insert is like shaped like a dog. It's kind of cute.
Your intro ad could be like, this gramophone is a great alternative to the iPad. And then you have everyone buy it. And then you go, are you sick of your gramophone making so much noise? Try these quiet cars. And then you get 2 sales out of every person.
Yeah,
That's so funny.
you solve the problem and then also sell the solution to solve.
Yeah. Exactly. Sell, what does the government do? They like make FDA rules really lax.
Pfizer releases the COVID vaccine and then buys the company that deals with COVID vaccine complications.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Business with a Z.
Yeah, exactly. No, but both great products.
You're on the right path, buddy. No, all you got to do
yeah.
is scale that up to global outreach.
Funny enough, a couple of my friends bought the gramophone. I got it for them and then delivered it to them.
Yeah.
To give it to their friends, and they had one of them had a niece, and then the other one had a daughter. So they got it. They like it and enjoying it. But I'm hoping the tablet is also going in that direction. So
Sweet.
Additionally, I had a lot of complications getting my cart set up, because an upsell is essentially when you click on an add to cart button. Traditionally speaking, there's probably a notification that pops up that says you have 1 item in your cart, and then you go and click on the cart and then you check out, right?
Yeah.
The way I wanted to structure it was that so when you click the add to cart button, it slides out the checkout page, and on the checkout page it has the item that you added at the top, and then it has other related products at the bottom.
Okay, so like
And then you can add them easily, right? And that's called an upsell. When you have a product that they've already put in their cart, but then you're also showing them other stuff they might like.
It's called Sam's Club. Sam's Club does this on their app.
Yeah,
Big on
yeah, it's relatively common.
Yeah.
But I was really struggling to get the formatting correct and get it to look how I wanted it. I had issues with the theme. I had issues with the actual count of items in the cart, the addition to get the sum total, the formatting, the refresh. Like, it was all screwed up through the theme. So I ended up getting another app in order to utilize the functionality that I wanted.
Yeah.
And so, actually, funny enough, the app has already paid for itself because it's
Okay.
$30 a month, and I've already made $30 back based
Sweet.
on that upsell
Sweet.
procedure. So in 2 days, I've already made my money back on the app, which is awesome. But I got that. It's called Upcart for anyone maybe watching who wants to do something like that. And then I also added an after sell to the website. And after sell is a post-purchase sale. So it's like when after they've checked out and purchased their product, and a window will come up and be like, add this item to your order for 20% off, 30% off, whatever it is, right? And so I added the same thing with an after sell as well. So after they go through the checkout, they also have the option to add it in after that point.
Right.
So just kind of 2 selling points to help give the product some visibility and some traction in that sense.
Right.
But those were my bulk things. A lot of effort went into actually building out the site, getting it right, going through Canva. You get images from your supplier in China, and they just look like ad images, like really, really bad Chinese, like CGI style, the type from like AliExpress and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they look terrible. So it was a lot of like editing work and doing masks in Canva and cutting it out, and like, probably 10, 12 hours just on different images. It, and that includes also, I did 3 weeks worth of organic posts this past week.
Right.
So I'm starting to post organically on the social media, scheduling them through Meta, like we do the posts for the podcast. And so I spent a lot of time creating organic posts for the products and then scheduling them out one every other day for the next 3 weeks.
Right.
So did that as well. And this week, business-wise, I'm kind of shifting my focus towards, I have some like minor customer service things to deal with. And then I want to do some conversion rate optimization testing. I've been wanting to do that. I haven't had the bandwidth to.
Yeah.
So I want to test different, better messaging and images with the Gramophone product, because I've learned a lot since that site was built out 2.5 months ago.
Yeah.
So I've learned a lot since that point. And I want to kind of go back to it and see if I can refresh it a little bit, make it a little bit better. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of clean up what I have there, improve some of the images because I have a lot more content now, improve some of the wording just a little bit, clean it up just a touch.
Yeah.
And then conversion rate optimize test that, as well as conversion rate optimization testing, or A/B testing, the product price. And so I want to go up a little bit and down a little bit. And see how the traction changes. And then I want to also test shipping price instead of product price, going up and down a little bit and seeing how much of an influence that has on sales. What's the return on ad spend? So I want to test those things, but new DCTs, dynamic creative tests, are launching this week for both products, launching tonight at midnight. And I'm also looking at a third product. It's a like dinosaur climber track. And so it's like
a climber track?
Yeah, it looks like a Jurassic Park theme ride, like a Jurassic Park theme roller coaster ride. It's got like this plastic dinosaur that has this like stairwell thing that has a track, and it's got these little cars on it that look like dinosaurs. And so they start at the top through the dinosaur's mouth, and then they kind of roll down this track through this like, and partially enclosure like a little bit, and then they roll back down. And then they all get in a line, and then they hit the bottom of the ladder. The motor kind of pops them up to the top, and then they keep going around and around.
Oh, okay. So it automatically resets it.
Yeah, it's motorized and stuff. And some of them have like lights in them and stuff like that, just depending on what you get. But there's a lot of great content out there. It's been doing really, really well on TikTok, and it's looking to be undersaturated on the Facebook Instagram market side.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to bring that to the table in the coming weeks as well.
Cool.
Maybe sooner rather than later. I may hold off on the conversion rate optimization testing if I want to get that launched as well.
Yeah.
Just depending on how this tablet goes this week. If the tablet totally flunks, I'll probably go right into trying that dinosaur climber. If the tablet's doing really, really well, I'll focus on scaling the 2 products I have and doing conversion rate optimization. So just depends on kind of how the week goes. I'll play it by ear.
Cool.
But that is by and large my business update.
Awesome.
A lot of that.
Sweet, dude.
Yeah, I think it's been a longer update for me.
Yeah. Well, usually
So-
it's like same stuff, more ads. Like that's
Yeah,
it.
I mean, there were more ads, but I had some new stuff in the past couple weeks.
Yeah, with
nice
new
on it.
products and new plans and
Mhm.
strategies, right? So I think it's a more interesting update than normal,
Mhm.
which indicates a happier mood this week than in previous episodes.
Yeah,
which is
fair enough.
cool. Yeah. All right, I have a fucking lot.
There you go.
So recently, my business update has been treasure hunting, right? For the past one podcast, but
Yeah.
really the past two because I did it in the week before the update, right?
Okay.
But this week that kind of got away from me because real estate stuff started happening. So 2 weeks ago, I almost lost my first client, because he is currently living in a home that his dad owns, and he's renting out the rooms to cover the lease. And he's like, you know what? If I'm going to be putting money down every month, I'd rather be building equity. I can sublease the rooms in the house that I own just the same. And it'll cover the mortgage. Maybe I pay a couple $100 more a month, but it's no big deal. I was like, that's a great plan. So we've been doing showings. We've been doing open houses. We've been going and trying to find him the place that he wants, right? Um, well, after a little while of looking, he came back to us and he was like, hey, my dad is actually thinking about selling his house. And if he does that, we don't need a real estate agent. And I was like, okay, that's true. Usually a seller will have a real estate agent to help find buyers. And then a buyer will have a real estate agent to act as insurance to make sure that they don't cut any corners or screw you into something that you shouldn't be having to deal with, right? Um, so I would still recommend you have a real estate agent, even so. And he was like, okay, that's a good point. I'm not totally sold on it. And I was like, dude, that's completely fine. I would rather do showings with you for the next 6 months and then end up not finding something that you like. And then you go and decide to buy your dad's house and not work with us, than miss out on all these other opportunities and miss out on a house that you would have been really happy with. So don't feel bad if we end up going through all these showings and we don't get something. He was like, okay, cool. In that case, let's keep doing showings. So we did. And we found a really fucking dope house. We found one. It's in a good area that I think is probably going to increase in value in the future. And it's got like a huge external detached garage in the backyard. And he likes to work on cars. So it's like the perfect fit, right? Great price, everything's awesome. So he got pre-approved for a mortgage, and we submitted an offer, which is the first time that I've been through the offer writing process. But at the time, the sellers were already considering another offer and had countered that one. So once you make an offer and a counter offer, you're locked in with each other until um, the seller says no, and then you bring another counter offer back. Now they can consider all the other counter offers, right? Um, so we were essentially waiting for them to figure out if they're going to go under contract or not. And if they didn't, then our offer would be considered. And if they did, we would have to go in as a backup offer. It sounded like it's an all cash offers, but you never really know. So I assumed, that they're probably going to go forward with it. Sometimes people back out. You never know why, right? Sometimes they're arguing about like price or, credit at closing and stuff like that. But sometimes people just decide they don't want to anymore, right? And it wound up falling through. So we got a counteroffer. And the counteroffer was not really the price that we were looking for, a little bit shorter inspection period than we would have wanted. But I was like, you know what? As far as the inspection period goes, at a certain point after like a week, you're already going to know everything. You're going to have all your inspections done. You're going to know everything. So all you're losing out with that additional time is like negotiation time. And let's be honest, if we get the inspections done in the first day or two, and we do the processing over the next 3 days, if you can't work out the negotiations in those last 2 days of the inspection period, then you're not going to buy the house anyways. Like the seller's just not going to play ball, right? But if we give a little now on the price, then maybe in the inspection period, when we inevitably find issues, because every house has issues, they'd be more willing to walk down, right, on price. So we ended up writing the offer. That offer got accepted. Or no, sorry, they gave us the counter and then we just accepted it. So we didn't have to write anything. We're under contract. So now we're officially under contract. And part of the reason we were able to get under contract is because Levi, who I met at the Pahanakava bar, is a home inspector for Shorebreak Home Inspections. And I met him a day before we got this counter offer. And I called him, or Grace called him, the day we got the counter. And she was like, hey, we need an inspection like ASAP. And he was like, I could be out tomorrow. And I was like, dude, what fucking perfect timing, right?
Yeah.
So we went through, and he's a general home inspector. So they do like a little bit of everything. But, if they recommend like a specialized person that they don't have. So like, you need special licensing to do WDO inspections, which is wood destroying organisms like termites and, rats and shit like that.
Yeah.
And plumbing. He doesn't have the special equipment to do plumbing inspections. So he had sandpiper and drain mechanics come out as the WDO and plumbing inspectors. So we had all the inspectors there on day 2 of the inspection period, which is fucking fast. Awesome.
Yeah.
They all did a really thorough job. Levi fucking rocks. Ryan from Sandpiper Pest Control crushed it. And their breakdown of everything is like fucking so thorough. I absolutely love it. And I've talked to other real estate agents and they're like, hey, don't go with like super thorough inspectors because the more stuff that they find, the more freaked out your buyer gets. But I don't understand that at all because that doesn't seem ethical, right? And it's like some of the stuff isn't a big deal. Like, okay, the shower door doesn't close all the way, right? You're not going to lower the price of the house because the shower door doesn't close all the way, right? But it's still good to know in an inspection report, right? And if you want to just have like a repairman come out and fix everything, you just send them the report, get a quote, and then go and fix everything. You don't have to deal with lowering the price of the house.
Yeah.
So right now I'm making an Excel sheet with Grace that breaks down everything that's wrong, categorizing them into major and minor issues, and then determining who we need to get quotes for to go, like who we would pay to go fix those things. And then we'll bring some of those things to the seller and we'll say, hey, listen, we quoted this all out. It's going to cost a bunch of money to fix everything. Some of this stuff shouldn't fall on you. Some of it should. So like, safety hazard things the seller should pay for before selling the house because it's not being sold as is. It's being financed. And they accepted a financed offer, meaning that they knew when they accepted our offer that they were on the hook to fix a couple things. So I'm hoping they play ball, considering we gave them a little bit of leeway on the offer price. So now we get a little bit in the way back on the inspection negotiations.
Yeah.
But we'll see. That's going to come up this week. We're waiting on a couple more quotes from people. But that is like fucking sick. The fact that we're like under contract and like ready to go and this house is fucking sick. So that means I have to get a brokerage. And Tyler actually made a really great point, that I haven't gotten a brokerage so far because I've been waiting on my tax refund to pay the initial dues, like $2,000. And I got my tax refund a couple weeks ago, so I could have gone and interviewed with a broker, but I haven't because I've been wrapped up with the treasure hunting stuff and then this offer. And so it's just not been on my radar, right? Because I'm not technically doing any of the real estate work here. It's all been Grace. I'm kind of job shadowing, for lack of a better term. But it's been a really great learning experience. And so Tyler said, yeah, go interview with Blue Marlin. And I was like, I would, but they're like high committal. I want you to do it full time, et cetera. And I have to continue engineering for a few months until the ball really picks up pace with real estate. And he was like, I mean, if you have the intentions of quitting and then you end up not quitting, but you already work for the brokerage, so long as you're making sales, it doesn't matter. And I was like, yeah, but I want to start like transparent, you know? Plus, if I'm going to be spending money on these realtor dues at the very beginning, I want it to be worthwhile and build a good rapport with my broker. Scratch your back, you scratch mine, right? And then he was like, dude, why don't you go to whatever brokerage you want and then walk in and say, hey, I have a client under contract. I need a brokerage to make this thing happen. Pay my realtor dues or give me a higher commission split and hire me. And I was like, oh, that's not a bad idea. I could even go to Blue Marlin and say, hey, I need a broker. I've got a client ready to go. I just need someone to pay my realtor dues. And then they'll go, okay, cool. We want you to work here full time. And then I'll go, well, no, I'm working at an engineering firm and I'm going to stay here for a couple months. And then they'll go, oh, well, we only really want someone who's working full time. And then I'll go, listen, if I'm able to find clients and get them under contract while working full time as an engineer, what do you think I'm going to be able to do in 6 months when I quit? Do you want to buy low now or do you want to buy high later when I go to another brokerage? They pay for my realtor dues. I bring them a bunch of money and then I come back and re-interview with you guys. That gives me more bargaining power. You don't want that. And then Tyler was like, dude, that's really smart. Because then now you're negotiating like in an interview. And then that shows like an ability to show your sales prowess, right?
Right.
So that's something that's probably going to have to happen this week or next week. So I have to put that on my calendar. We also picked up a listing appointment on Saturday, so yesterday morning. There's an older guy in my parents' neighborhood who's looking to move to another city to live closer to his family who can, take care of him. And my parents recommended us, and so we went over and we did a listing appointment. That was super fun. Pleasantly surprised with the state of the house. He's a heavy smoker, so there's a lot of smoke damage in the house, but it's honestly not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And the floor plan is really cool. So I think we can actually get more out of that house than I originally was thinking we could. And then on top of that, I started talking to Tyler about the listing appointment because I was like, when you list a house for sale, what are your favorite strategies? So we were talking about that. And then he was like, honestly, dude, you're going to market it just fine because you've already done advertising stuff before. What you should really be focused on is turning this sale into 2 more sales, because every sale should lead to 2 more. And I was like, I mean, like how? Like, I'm thinking with this other client, like, okay, well, he's moving out of his dad's house, and then his dad's might be looking to sell too. So like maybe I could sell for him, but that's a 1-to-1 thing. So like, how do you turn one sale into 2? And he was like, when you list this house, print out a mailer that says, hey, this house in your neighborhood is for sale. And if you're interested in buying, contact this number. And if you're not interested in buying, but maybe considering selling your house, contact us anyways, and we can help you sell your house too. Send that to like everyone in the neighborhood. Do it like 4 or 5 times. Like email, like send physical letters in the mail, like, twice a week for like a month, right? And then go door to door, because anybody who doesn't reach out to you online will already be primed and familiar, kind of like how your ads work. And then when you go to door, they already know who you are and they can see how you conduct yourself in person. And I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. And he was like, did you know that over 60% of residential home buyers come from the same neighborhood? It's just people like house hopping. And I was like,
Wow.
really? And he was like, yeah, because a lot of times there'll be like a 2-bed, 2-bath house and they want a 3-bed, 3-bath, but they don't want to move very far. So they just move to like 2 streets down. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So now I'm considering the mailers. And then he was like, actually, I know somebody who's in a similar neighborhood who's currently like considering selling their house, but I can't work with them. But if you go door to door, like, there's someone looking to sell. And then I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I don't know who that person is. Well, I do know, but I'm not going to say on camera. I know who that person is. But that means that every door that I knock on could have somebody in the same position who I know is looking to sell and just doesn't have an agent yet, which is really cool. So that listing appointment went really well. We have a follow-up appointment next week. And then past that, I started thinking about I haven't even gotten to the treasure hunting yet, which makes me sad because I've given a lot of time to that too. Honestly, I don't know how I've gotten all this done in 2 weeks, but I started thinking about turning one sale into 2, because if that happens, you snowball really quickly, right? And um, I had an appointment with Callie and Zeke at Pauhana because I built that apartment spreadsheet that has like every apartment in Vieira, Melbourne, and Palm Bay, and you can configure by floor plan and monthly rates and stuff, right? And so we sat down, and using their preferences, I found that of the 109 total housing options in these 3 cities, 44 of them fit their price and floor plan configurations. So like 2-bed, 2-bath, whatever. Of those 44, 34 fit their location preference, 20 had appealing photos, and 8 had floor plans that interested them. So the next step are to reach out and ask questions to the leasing agents and schedule tours for them. But in like an hour, we went from 109 options, and I know that's every option because I'm keeping track of every apartment and townhome in the area. And then we whittled it down to like the 8 that work for them. And they were really appreciative and blown away, because they were like, all of the apps that we've been using suck. They don't show everything. They're difficult to navigate. You can kind of like favorite your preferred ones, but you can't exactly remember where they all are. It's not clearly laid out. But now we feel really confident going forward that like these are the 8 apartment complexes that we want to see. And each of those 8 apartment complexes might have multiple floor plans that interest them. And so they were really appreciative. And so they left happy. And then I thought, okay, even if the apartment complex that they go with doesn't offer commission, that's a happy client who will go and refer us to other people, right?
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, okay, you could work for 4 months to help someone find and buy a home, or maybe 3 months to help list and sell their home. And then those happy clients are going to go off and tell other people, right? 4 months of work. Or I can help someone find an apartment in an hour and a half, and they're going to be just as happy and go tell people as well. And those people might have people in their life that are looking to buy homes, similar with the people who are actually buying the homes. So the continual like return on investment advertising there is the same, but with way less work to do apartments. And so I was like, oh my God, dude, I was excited to do this apartment list because it's a really great way to like help people and like make a little bit of money. But I hadn't considered that the referral, like I've seen people more excited about the apartment sheet than I have the actual like buying and selling of homes, which is a big deal, especially because it's so much easier to do.
Yeah,
So
that is cool.
I'm super stoked about that. But that's my business update for the weeks.
Were you able to watch the TikTok that I sent to you and Grace?
Today?
Yeah, it
Not
was
yet.
recently. You should watch that. I actually genuinely thought it was interesting. It's a real estate agent, and they have like a really funny way of selling the houses that they're like sellers agents for.
Okay.
It's entertaining yet informative, and it has like a really unique take.
Is it
And I
Speed Tours guy?
no,
Okay.
it's a woman.
Okay.
But I thought that you and Grace, could do something similar, or maybe a similar idea. Everyone's got a fucking idea for everyone's business, so I hate saying that, but I did genuinely think it was interesting. I at least thought you would get a good kick out of it. So yeah, take a look. Let me know what you think.
I will.
Yeah.
I will. I was in the middle of pulling the pork when you sent that, so I haven't seen it yet.
Fair enough.
What's your life update from the past 2 weeks? Have you lived one?
I just realized that I don't really have one on here. My life update was actually my work, my rare work update. But I'm part of that parts and materials team. And they wanted my input on how to fix the problem, which was like kind of interesting because I've never sat in like a meeting with like other higher up people who have been there for 20, 30 years. And someone asked me like, hey, like, how do you think we should solve this problem? Because we've reached like a dead end and we don't know what to do. Like, that was kind of interesting. I was prepared enough for that conversation because I know enough about the problems to be able to understand how to respond, but I wasn't prepared for that being the case that meeting.
Yeah.
But I was in the middle when I was at work of writing up an email to them of like kind of walking through some like superficial solutions to the problem, but also talking about like why these types of problems tend to stem like continuously. Like, why do we keep fighting like critical deadline issues constantly and just trying to put out fires? And like, I want to talk a little bit about that. Because I talked a little bit about it on the meeting and they were really receptive to it and enjoyed it. So I'm going to put something together like that too. But on the life thing, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. I like my podcasts. So this week I've been reading the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Really good. Really like it. It's a good, interesting book. I have some questions, but I'm also kind of midway through, so I'm not going to judge anything yet. Overall, I think it's valuable and I've enjoyed it thus far. And then I've also been listening to some various history podcasts. I've been listening to that intellectual science podcast I sent you, which is really interesting.
I don't remember this one.
It was last night. I sent a Spotify link.
I might not have seen it.
It's essentially talking about the role of intellect in your ability to go through life and the role of intellect in society and what correlations we see and potentially why.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, really controversial, very, very controversial subjects because it gets super heated because there are cultural discrepancies that are evident based on data. And there's a lot of debate as to why those cultural discrepancies exist and how to solve them. And then there's evidence for different attempts that were made to solve them. And then there's the question of like, why do we even need to solve them? Like, solve them is implying that it's a problem to be like, 10 IQ points dumber than, some other person, right?
Right.
Which is like a whole other social question itself. I just find it really intellectually stimulating and I like it.
Right.
But I was thinking about it when I was listening to it, like the interviewer is Lex Friedman, who's a great guy. And he was like, in the middle of the interview, he was like, I see why people get uncomfortable with this topic. And like, to me, I was thinking about that and I was like, I can empathize with why it makes people uncomfortable, but it doesn't make me uncomfortable. And I was trying to think about why.
You're probably not one of the races that have negative things said about them.
No, but like,
you're a straight white male, so you kind of have it made.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's fair. But like, I've also met people who are definitely intellectually smarter than me and are able to grasp things more quickly than I and will likely progress. If I were to take a science path and they were to take a science path, they would progress farther than I would because I can't quite grasp at the same rate that they can. Like, I've met people who are clearly better at some things, even with like music or arts or photography. Like, I've just met people who are just inherently better and more talented and quicker to pick it up than I am.
Yeah.
Right. But like, I've never seen that as a problem. I've just seen it was like, oh, well, like, I have my strengths and like they have their strengths and like I try to play into my strengths and they play into their strengths and like we all kind of work collectively together and that's beautiful. Like, we're all people collectively working together in society. And
what if you had no strengths? Because there are people out there who just aren't good at anything, and there are other people who are better at stuff and pick things up faster.
Yeah,
like those are the people that, are quick to feel insulted, and for valid reason, right? It sucks to not be good at anything. We're all not good at something at some point, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's fair. It's a question I haven't answered yet, but it's just something I've been thinking about of like, there are there are very few topics I think that make me feel uncomfortable anymore, because that's kind of the point I was getting to. It's like there's very few things that like I talk about that make me uncomfortable. Maybe it's uncomfortable to talk to people about it that I don't know.
What about death?
For like me to think about, well, like I don't feel uncomfortable to talk about it with you, right?
Really? Okay.
I don't think so.
Like a couple months ago, I brought it up at the end of the podcast just to kind of throw you off, and I did a little bit. You were like, you ended up being like really sad at the end, and you were like, I have to think about it.
Well, I was probably just thinking about it, but it didn't make me uncomfortable. It probably made me question. It probably made me interested. It probably made me not know.
So uncomfortable is then like it makes you
Uncomfortable is
sweat.
like that gut wrenching. I don't even want to touch that topic. That's how I see uncomfortable as.
There's one word I bet we could say that would make you start to feel that way.
Jeez, probably. But I I thought it was interesting.
Right.
And because I've started, the more I listen to these podcasts and the more I listen to different people talk, the more I realize that there's a lot of information out there, and you have to be able to just kind of absorb it at face value and work on a very long time horizon to be able to understand the issue concretely. And so that's just kind of something interesting from a life update. Also been listening to this thing about the Shroud of Turin, which is
The Shroud of Turin.
that's the shroud that Jesus Christ was wrapped in after he was crucified. So it was deemed a forgery in the 1980s, but there's a lot of issues with the carbon-14 dating, and so there was new research that came out and a bunch of other studies and people talking about it, and it's just a very interesting discussion. But just listening to podcasts, I guess, is my life update, one of my life updates. So that's been my life.
Did you see my Instagram post from this morning? It
Um,
was my Happy Easter post.
oh, was it the Koenigsegg?
No.
Oh,
I made an Instagram post and I said, he is risen. Happy Easter. But it's Max Verstappen because he put it on pole yesterday.
oh, girl.
Dude, that car should not have been on pole. And he fucking made it work. But I thought it was funny.
Yeah. I had a really nice time. Jokes aside, though, I had a really nice time at Easter today.
Yeah.
Went to
too.
church, and I know.
My Formula One
I went
is
to
my
I went to church and I had a very nice time.
That's good.
So,
I'm
yeah,
glad.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So what's the Shroud of Erised or
The Shroud of Turin.
yeah, what's the beef with it?
It's
What did
so
you
the
learn?
so far what I've learned, I'm about halfway through the podcast, just a touch less. So it's a
So we're gonna get half the information.
no, but I mean they do present some really good stuff in the first half that is interesting. I was just mentioning stuff that I'm listening to and I'm interested in. I haven't finished the Intellect podcast.
They talked about this in an Indiana Jones movie, so I'm curious.
Yeah, it's so the Shroud of Turin is claimed to be the shroud that Jesus Christ was wrapped in after he was crucified.
Okay.
And there's also a headcloth that has a different name, and that is the headcloth that was apparently used when he was on the cross. They wrapped his face and his head in it before they took him down, and then after they brought him to the tomb to be, covered with the stone slab and all that, they rewrapped him in the Shroud of Turin. So that's what the Shroud of Turin is.
So there's blood on it.
Correct. Yes.
Are you familiar with Colossal?
No.
That's the company that just brought back direwolves using DNA from old frozen direwolf
I
samples.
don't know if the church is gonna allow that. I think that would be sacrilege for
Do you
sure.
know how fucking wild it would be? Dude, what if this is the second coming that everyone keeps talking about? Your pastor could be right. Jesus Christ is back, and it's because
I
Colossal
have
was
a
able
hunch
to
that's
genetically
not
code.
gonna be it.
But it could happen.
I have a
Wait,
hunch.
this is the whole Bible because it's the Virgin Mary, right? So they're going to scientifically implant the genetic embryo and then they have to put it in a surrogate, a woman who hasn't had sex, right? Her name could be Mary,
This is terrible. This is terrible.
but it's possible.
Anyways, the Shroud of Turin was the shroud that Christ was wrapped in.
Okay.
And so the Shroud of Turin in the 1980s was carbon dated, and the carbon dating had a lot of different issues. It had issues in the data itself and how they analyzed the data, as well as they took a piece of the shroud that was repaired at a later date in order to date the shroud. And there was also controversy about this dating because this was a very heavily this was like a very atheist advocate group and science organization that took on this analysis,
So
right?
biased.
And so there's concerns with bias and stuff like that, right? And so at this point, there's been 112 different academic studies that have come out from a variety of different groups disputing those original findings in 1980 in regards to the carbon dating.
Yeah.
Now the head wrapping, I can't remember the name, but the head wrapping, it was not a turban.
Hijab.
It's we'll call it a towel, the head towel.
That's insulting.
Yeah, that probably is. Okay. We'll call it the head
The
cloth.
rag.
No, I can't remember the name.
piece
I
of
wish
cloth.
I had so we didn't have to go through this exercise.
The piece of cloth that went around his head.
Yes, thank you. That we have recorded history back until the 7th century AD. So we know that that is at least that old for a fact, right? The Shroud of Turin, we don't have quite the same level of history, but what we can look at is the pattern of, because you can actually see the face imprint on the cloth. And so you can look at the pattern of that face imprint versus the Shroud of Turin. You can look at the blood spots. You can look at the blood type. You can look at, there's a variety of different things. Also linen degradation. It has this all cloth has some portion of linen in it. And that linen degrades over time, and that the time it takes is approximately between 2,000 and 5,000 years. The linen content in the Shroud of Turin is completely degraded.
Got it.
Which means it has to be at least 2,000 years old, which is one piece of evidence to dispute that it's a 13th century replica. Because if it was a 13th century replica, then it would only be 800 years old. Right?
Oh,
but if all
okay,
of
got
the,
it. Yes,
but if all of
not
the
a
linen,
replica, you mean that it is the original.
correct.
Got it. Okay.
Correct. So it is older than the originally claimed forgery of the
Right.
13th century, right? It has to be because of the linen degradation in the actual cloth itself, the fabric.
And you can't force the linen degradation.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
And all cloth has it.
Yep.
Additionally, when you're actually looking at the weave and the fibers and the style of the cloth, it much more closely matches like first century AD or earlier cloth than it does later medieval cloth. The actual face imprints of the face cloth versus the Shroud of Turin are a 1-for-1 match in the blood spots, in the blood type, in the face, in actually there's a certain type of blood that it has a higher content of, I can't remember, but when your lungs are filling with blood, it releases a certain chemical composition that will actually change the blood and it like change the blood composite. And you can detect that in even like dried blood spots. And so the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, he was beaten, he had, bashed lungs and, a lot of other injuries. And that blood that's found on the cloth as well as the Shroud of Turin matches the types of injuries that Jesus Christ would have had. So there's evidence for that as well. Now, on top of that, there's also a large mystery in regards to how, because the Shroud of Turin has a fully imprinted embodiment of a man in it. You can see the full man in it. It's a relatively long cloth. And there's no current scientific explanation for how the print was made. Because when you stand close to the cloth, you cannot see the print. You can only see the print if you're 8 feet or more away from the cloth. And the actual fibers that are like slightly darkened in order to create the image of this man, presumably Jesus Christ based on the evidence, is they are nanoscopic in nature. They are very, very fine actual changes in the fabric. Like, so it's a
Is it not the blood that made the stain that would be in the shape of a man?
No, I'll pull up a picture for you of it later, but
Gotcha.
you can see it's very evident where the blood stains are and where the image is, and they are evidentially different, and they are different in style and nature, and the actual image is not made of blood because they can detect the blood type, which is AB.
Right.
And there's a bunch of different things that tie into the AB blood type as well. Like we can go down the rabbit hole of Eucharistic miracles as well. And all of those miracles happen with AB blood as well, and so consistently tested. But it's just a very interesting conversation. It's interesting to hear this guy started out as a skeptic and then worked through it, as like an analysis for a PhD. Started to believe in Christ and the Church through his research, and then has dedicated the past 10 or so years just to researching the Shroud of Turin. And so he's very knowledgeable on the topic. You can
So
quite
wait,
bias either way.
they're trying to figure out how old it is, right?
Correct.
But weren't there like thousands of other people that were also crucified in the same way as Jesus, like in that 100-year time frame? So how do they know that it's his and not someone else's who was killed in the same fashion at the same time?
That's a good question. The evidence for that comes from the imprinted image.
So like
And
the face
also
looks the same as what?
the imprinted image on the Shroud of Turin cannot be explained by any conventional dyes or other methods of projecting an image onto a fabric. That's where the
So that
evidence
thing
comes from, the
still happens.
resurrection, right? Because the Shroud of Turin is essentially an embodiment of the death and the rebirth of Christ, right? Because it was when he died, he was wrapped in the shroud, and then when he was found Sunday morning by Mary, the shroud was next to the tomb of Christ, with the slab moved off, and Christ wasn't there, right? So this shroud, we don't have physical documentation to say that it is the shroud, right? But it was kept in, I can't remember the name of the family, but a family kept that shroud, and then gifted it to the Pope in the 1980s, who then commissioned the carbon dating to be done
Gotcha.
in the 1980s, right? So, and I'm also only an hour into
Yeah.
2.5 hour podcast.
Yeah.
So maybe there's more to come out about it, more questions to try and answer. I don't know, but just stuff that I've been listening to and interested in. I remember as a kid watching like a natural history documentation on the Shroud of Turin, and I remember them talking about how they carbon dated it, and it's only, the 13th century or whatever. And so I was it popped up on my feed. I was interested in it because I was like, oh, like this is kind of cool. And it was also hosted by Michael Knowles, who's someone that I generally like to listen to. Some things I disagree with him on, but generally speaking, I at least feel as though he is honest in his views. Even if I disagree with him, he is honest about what he thinks and why. So I appreciate that, and I like listening to his content. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been digging into.
It's interesting to me that everyone is focusing so much on the date of it and not the like how the shadow appeared. Because that's
There are
the
people focusing on as well.
because like even like let's say that
Yeah.
it was made 15 years ago, and like the whole family keeping it in its history or whatever 1980. Let's say they made it in 1950, right? And like the whole history is like made up and it's word of mouth and there's nothing supporting it. They fabricated it in 1950, right? Fucking who cares about the age? Because what's cooler is how did you make the imprint on it, right?
Yeah,
And like that should be I feel like that's where the like actual research.
So, from what I've gathered in the podcast thus far, there was a particle scientist who tried to analyze how the image could be imprinted, and he concluded that it would have to be an extremely short amount of time under an extremely high amount of energy in order to create an imprint like that. Like
It's like a burn.
like a very, very high energy, very short time frame burn. It was something crazy. I don't really want to get the numbers wrong, because I'll sound like a kook if I get them wrong. But they were something like 33 million watts at 0.005 seconds of time. Like something like really wild in either direction, right? But just really interesting, and it's really interesting to pull up a picture of the shroud too, because you're like, it doesn't look like a print. Like you can obviously see that like there is a man printed onto the shroud, but it doesn't look like a conventional print.
Does it look like the shadows of people after like Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
No, you can actually see like a texture and like actual, like there's detail in the.
There were detail. Have you seen those shadows?
Yeah, I have seen the shadow, but
It doesn't look
it's
like
not,
that on cloth.
It's not like a shadow imprinted on the cloth. It's very hard to describe. I'll pull up a picture for you because it's hard for me to describe what it looks like without like it's easier to show you.
Right.
But just interesting stuff I've been listening to. That podcast, the Anti podcast, listening to some World War I, World War II podcasts, some with Tucker Carlson, listened to some other podcasts about cancer research, just kind of like all over the place. It's just kind of like, I like to listen to new things and kind of absorb information.
Yeah.
I find that the more I do that, the harder it is for me to answer questions though. Because I like have all this, someone will ask me an opinion about something and they'll be like, I don't know, what do you think about this new political policy? And I'm like, and I go through like 16 different thousand things I've listened to about it. And I have all these different perspectives and like all these different people that like kind of culmination together. And like, I kind of just settle on like, honestly, I think it's really complicated. And like, that's kind of all I can say without getting into a 3-hour discussion about it. Right. Yeah. But I just enjoy it for myself. It's interesting. I like it. I like listening to different stuff. So that's been largely my life update. It's pretty much been work, drop shipping, going to see you guys at Pauhana when I get the chance, and listening to podcasts.
Cool.
That's what I've been into.
I like listening to a bunch of different stuff like on the same day because I think it helps my task switching, my brain. Like it makes me easier for me to hop from like one thing to the next and like not lose my place,
Mhm.
which I think is really cool. But I haven't had a lot of that this week because a lot of what I've been doing this week is treasure hunt. So here's my life update.
There you go.
So firstly, I'll mention my computer, the new laptop that I got, only has one USB-A port. It's on the left side of the computer. My mouse is a Bluetooth mouse that plugs into a USB-A port, and the fucking 8 inches between the receiver and the mouse is enough to be interrupted when my hand is on the keyboard.
Is this? Oh, you have your own mouse. I didn't get you a mouse, right?
Correct.
I got you a mouse pad.
Correct. Yes.
I think I got my mom the same mouse I have for Christmas. I really like that one because you can stand like 20 feet away and it still works.
I love my mouse, right?
Yeah.
You can be pretty far away. The problem is if there's even one item in between it and the receiver, it goes to shit, right? But I found a USB-A to USB-A extension cable. I have had this cable for like 15 years. I never knew what it was. I'm not a cable guy. So like I just kept it in the bag.
I have one of those too. I've never used it.
Deep pull. I was walking around at Target and I saw it and I was like, wait, I have something like this. And I went home and I found it last night and it works. Perfect timing because last night I had to crank out the inspection sheet thing. So like it came in clutch. But okay,
I've started using a mouse recently. Can you believe that?
I don't know how you
my trackpad wife with a mouse.
I don't know how you went with
It's actually like way nicer. I understand why people use mice now. It's like really awesome.
Yeah. Do you ever wonder how much more you could have gotten done? Like,
Remember 6 months ago when I was like, I'm gonna start eating berries and yogurt, and you're like, you are officially getting into like the 14-year-old level of understanding about general health. It's like that's the same thing that's happening with tech right now. It's like this mouse thing.
Oh,
sick. Yeah.
I wonder if you could quantify like how much time you've lost, like how much like if using a mouse is like 98% efficiency and using a trackpad is like 60% efficiency, how much time have you lost in the time you spent on your computer using the trackpad?
Well, yeah. Well,
I lose a lot of time with
sometimes I do use the trackpad to scroll sideways though.
I've got the mouse scroll wheel.
Yeah, but I'm starting to learn the shift key and the scroll. Yeah. So now I'm like good with that way, and I don't have to use the trackpad.
There we go.
Yeah,
figuring it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so treasure hunting. So this has developed a lot in the last couple weeks. Here's been my experience with it. This is the order of operations that I went through. So I watched the Netflix series, which kind of got me into it. So then I started watching YouTube videos on it that talked about the series and then talked about the Forest Fen treasure hunt, which preceded this one. And then I read Justin's book, Beyond the Map's Edge. That's the name of the treasure hunt. And the reason is because he wants you to go beyond your map's edge and like actually get up off your desk and go into the wilderness and find it. He wants to encourage people to get out there. And so then I started breaking down the poem in an email draft so that I could work on it from multiple computers and devices. Like I always have one ready to go. And then converting that into a Google Doc periodically to like kind of save my changes. After that, I started watching Justin's old interviews and internet appearances because he decided to do this hunt. He had been thinking about it since like 2019. Decided to do it in 2020, hid the treasure in 2023 and filmed the Netflix doc, and then wrote his book. And now everything's being released now in 2025. So there's some nuggets from old interviews where he talks about like, if I hit a treasure or I don't like this about this treasure hunt, and then I can infer, okay, he probably didn't do something like that for his treasure hunt, right? So I've been watching those. Then I went back and I studied Justin's Instagram posts because he has all his captions turned off. So no one can comment on the photos, and they go back to like 2020. And there's a bunch of photos from like, different national parks and wilderness locations and stuff like that. So I'm looking for notable locations. I joined a Discord group. They actually have a really cool, like nightly gathering of folks in a voice chat channel where everyone shares what's going on. And what's cool is there's only like maybe 30 people in there. So some of the most dedicated people to this treasure hunt are sharing their finds to like 30 other people, but not posting it to YouTube for like the thousands of people to see, right? But what's interesting, I found from a live show I was watching 2 nights ago, someone has been in that voice chat recording it and then uploaded that to AI and then had AI change the voices, and they're posting that to YouTube, which I didn't recognize. I listened to that channel because Justin doesn't have an audiobook. So when I'm walking around, I can listen to YouTube videos, but I really enjoy scrolling the Reddit forums to see.
I feel like that's illegal.
I think it is too. And in there,
I feel like you can't record someone's voice without their consent in a chat.
In the Discord owners had this live show and they were like, just so everyone knows this is happening. And they talked about it and they were like, Discord is a public forum. our channel is a public forum. We don't have a disclaimer saying that you might be recorded. So technically we think it's legal. But from here on, we're going to put a disclaimer because they can't stop it. Like even if they figure out who it is and ban, then they'll just make another account because there's thousands of people in this Discord, right? And only like 30 of them call into the voice chat. And like, dude, these people talk all night. I listen to them falling asleep. And then I hear them when I wake up in the morning. So, I'm kind of like eat, sleep, and breathing this. So then after the Discord thing, I started a poem dissection in Excel. So I broke it down line by line, stands like section by section, because each line might have 2 or 3 clues. So I broke it up into, a section, and I started noting any reference that Justin makes in any news like source. So like, you know, one of the phrases is as hope surges clear and bright, right? So I have as hope surges in one and then clear and bright in the other. So any reference that Justin makes to the word hope or a synonym to it in Netflix, in interviews, past and present, his book, emails, his website, I have a reference noted there so that when I'm deciphering the poem, I can see, well, okay, has he ever mentioned this before publicly, right? And then I realized that the Netflix clues are actually pretty important. I've seen a couple things from him that denote that the next Netflix clues are probably more important than I gave them credit for at first. And people have noticed a couple things moving around in the background. And so I thought, okay, I should go in scene by scene and like look at the background. So I did that. I went all the way through Netflix. I went frame by frame through the scenes that Justin is in, and I wrote down everything that I noticed in the background, everything that changed from shot to shot. And then at the very end, he says, just so you know, I snuck clues into this Netflix stock, so it's worth your time to look and listen carefully. And I was like, fuck, I just went through the whole Netflix series and I looked. I didn't do shit about listening. So I went back through and I started going to the scenes where he is at his desk in his home because he hid clues in his home. And I started recording the script of what he was saying. So I recorded a transcript, I guess is the way you say it, of everything he said while he was at his desk. So I went through all of Netflix and I did that. And then I realized, oh, hang on a second. They don't just sit down and record a sentence and then plop that into the Netflix doc, right? They'll put B-roll over it, or they'll take bits of what he's saying and they'll overlay that on B-roll at a different section in the video. So some of the Justin voiceover from episode 1 could be from a recording where he sat down in episode 3 and he didn't know what was going to be cut up or not. So that voiceover from episode 1, while they're showing a scene of a mountain or a river, right, might actually be really important. I can't tell because I can't see his face because it's voiceover. He didn't know it was going to be voiceover. So then I went through all 3 hour-long episodes, and I recorded every word that he said out loud in an Excel sheet, line by line, and what was happening in the screen. If it was a voiceover, where the setting was, what was in the background, what was going on, what his facial expressions were, what hand gestures he made, which leg was crossed over the other one, right? And I noticed a lot of the things that I've been seeing on Reddit. There are a couple things that I've seen on, like, I think are important. I've seen on Reddit and other people have seen them too, but not very many. But I think it holds more significance than most people are giving it weight to. And there's 2 things that I found that I haven't seen anyone talk about or even reference or even start to look into. No one's even, a lot of times if someone's curious about something, they'll say, hey, has anyone thought about XYZ? Someone should go and run that analysis. And then like they wait for it to come back, right? So like he mentioned that there could be a cipher hidden in the poem, which is where if you take like one word and then you like what's it called? Translate each letter over a certain number of letters, it creates a secondary like verse or like a hidden message, right? They used it in World War II a lot. So someone will say like, oh, hey, someone should do a cipher for the word hope, but then they're not going to do it. So they're just going to wait for someone else to do it, right? I haven't seen anyone ask about this yet. And to my knowledge, I'm the only person who's done it. And you can only do it if you go through every single frame of Netflix. So
Wow.
I found something pretty cool and I think it's significant. So real estate has been demanding a lot of my attention in the past few days. So I'm going to have to like regroup and get a game plan when I get back into this. But I'm potentially looking at traveling mid-May, depending on what the weather looks like, because there's still snow in some areas. And I have like my brother's graduation and a couple other things. But I think I'm getting closer to an idea of where it is. I have a hunch of where it is, but it doesn't quite line up with the poem. I kind of want to go there just to look around anyways and see, even though it doesn't fit in the poem, but I kind of feel like that's also a waste of money. It would just suck if I didn't go out there because I couldn't figure out how it fit in the poem and then someone found it and like, maybe they didn't know either, but they just stumbled upon it because they noted the same location I did. So I'm thinking about it. But before that, I have to buy a bunch of shit because I need like a sat phone and I need bear spray and I need a Pelican case so that I can take my gun with me. I have to read into, the gun laws for the states that I'll be going to. Because bears are a real issue in the West. and it's springtime. So like now they're all awake and hungry.
Yeah.
And several people have had run-ins with him already, and I'm not taking any chances. So
There you go.
yeah, that's my life update that isn't related to our podcast topic, but I have a whole fucking update that is related to our podcast topic. Where's my sheet? Here we go. I got so many fucking pages here. Jesus.
You got quite a few. I got one.
I do. I've got
It's double-sided, though.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so I went back and I rewatched at the end of the last episode. I complained about the Space Coast crew hiring process because we had just gone through the interviews for the candidates that we had for the new director of rowing. And I decided at the time that I would not be doing a background check on the candidate that was under review, right? I had recommended against interviewing him in the first place. We did the interview, the board was split, and ultimately they decided moving forward, let's do a background check, let's check his references, and then maybe we give him a second round of interviews. And I was fed up with it, and I didn't want to deal with it because I was like, you know what? I've already done the research on this guy. I already know that he's not a good fit, and no one's listening to me anyway, so like, what's the point?
Yeah.
And after I slept on it, I reconsidered the situation, and I realized that no one else has done the preliminary research that I had done. Nobody prepared for the interviews ahead of time, and they likely won't be doing that going forward. So I decided that I'm going to jump in with both feet and give it my all to do a thorough analysis of the background here, right? So I went back to the resume that he sent us, and I found a bunch of discrepancies in it. And I assembled all of that in a document that I would later send in an email, right? So here's like a quick breakdown of what I found. So he claims to be a world champion on his LinkedIn, Spotify podcast, YouTube channel, Vimeo, X, and Instagram accounts, right? The only World Rowing Championship that he went to, he finished 6th, 19.4 seconds off the real world champions of that season, the United States. He was a coxswain in that boat, right? A lot of his coaching centers around rowing more so than coxing. That's totally possible. There are coxswains out there who are experienced enough to recommend to rowers, how to row, like they can coach. I wouldn't say that he's one of them based off of the rowing that he has displayed in his own, advertisements. He won the Nations Cup in 1995, which is very different to the World Championships. He frequently misconstrues those, saying that he's been to 3 World Championships. He hasn't been. He's been to 3 World Rowing organized events, one of which was the World Championships, where he finished 6th, 19 seconds off the lead. The other 2 were the Nations Cups, which were at the time one-off races that World Rowing held for different nations to bring their teams to test out equipment lineups and figure out where they wanted to actually put the real deal stuff for the World Championships, right? Has absolutely no bearing on the World Championships, has absolutely no bearing on the Olympics. The World Championships is the premier regatta of rowing every year, apart from the years just before the Olympics, because they can be qualifiers for that, right? The top 5 usually automatically qualify for the Olympics, and then the rest of them, if there's other slots open, they have to go to, it's called like the final shot regatta or something like that, right? And that's the Olympic qualifying regatta, where people fight over the last couple spots to get into the Olympics, right? So he also makes claim in his Spotify podcast that he would have gone to the Olympics if they didn't cut his category of coxed 4, right? They had straight 4s that year, so no coxswains. And that's true. They did cut that event. But he finished 6th, not in the top 5, meaning he didn't automatically qualify for the Olympics. He would have had to go to the Olympic qualifying regatta, which he didn't do. So it's not fair to claim that he would have gone to the Olympics either. On top of that, he claims to know how to prevent lower back injuries, but clearly demonstrates he does not. In a lot of videos, he talks about how over 80% of kids aged 12 to 18 have lower back injuries, and it's because they row with improper form. And then he demonstrates that at the catch, you don't want to be leaning too far forward, and you don't want to have your shoulders slouched, and at the finish, you don't want to have poor posture either. And although those are good points to avoid lower back injury, the real issue is that at the catch, he opens his back immediately. He doesn't do legs, back, arms. He does legs and back, or back and legs, because sometimes he opens his back before anything else, and he breaks his arms pretty much immediately. So instead of doing legs, backs, arms, he does all of it at the same time, which causes lower back injury, because essentially you're splitting the load of the stroke up amongst each of those parts evenly instead of all in your legs and then using your back to hang, right? That's a novice thing. Novice rowers know legs, back, arms, right? Eventually, after your first couple years, maybe you start to really understand what hanging really means, right? I would say that that's more of like an intermediate term. But if you're a coach, you should know that, and you should be demonstrating that even when you're talking about the basics, right? So he very clearly has like no understanding of the fundamental of the rowing stroke, right? This guy's name is Miroslav Jesnanov, by the way. I'm going to put him on blast because this is ridiculous. So the real contentious point here is that in the background check, I went to his resume to look for his references, right? He references working for several different rowing organizations, but most of those were over 10 years ago. And like coaching staff and board membership changes so frequently. I asked Justin, who's currently a coach and on the board for Space Coast Crew, if he's familiar with who Alex Winstead is. And he said no. Alex Winstead was my coach for one season from 2017 to 2018, right? So not even 10 years ago. And he had no idea who he was, right? So reaching out to those teams, it's unlikely that you're going to get anything back because people probably aren't a part of it, right? But I was like, you know what? I'll take the piss out of it anyways. I'll reach out anyways, right? The only two people he quoted on his resume was a current rower who's in the Olympic trials, right? I reached out to him on Instagram, no response. And Dwight Howard, the NBA player, who I sent an Instagram DM to, but haven't heard back from. So not reputable sources, right? In an Instagram video, he talks about coaching the kid who's now going to the Olympic trials and how great he is and how he was like a core like supporter of him in his early years and that he followed the Misha method, which is his style of rowing that he advertises. It's the Misha method, right? His name's Miroslav, but he goes by Misha.
Yeah.
And this kid followed the Misha method. And if you want to be successful like him, then he's the coach to do it, right? I reached out to that kid. And that kid was like, hey, man, I wish I could tell you more. He coached me for my first 4 to 6 months of rowing, but I haven't heard from him since then. He probably claims more credit than he really is owed because he didn't really coach me for very long. And I was like, huh. So then I reached out to a rowing organization that he coached for a time that wasn't listed on his resume, but he referenced working for in an Instagram video. When I reached out to that team, the president of that board reached back out to me and was like, hey, I'd love to talk on the phone. So I called him. He was like, listen, man, my kid was on the team at the time. You know, Misha only coached him for a couple months. He's probably taking more credit than he deserves. Same story, right? Misha in that Instagram video said that he had to leave that team due to unforeseen circumstances. To this guy's knowledge, it wasn't disciplinary or anything like that. Misha just wanted to move to another state. And I was like, okay, cool. At least that clears, right? So like, I know for a fact that he doesn't know how to coach because he can't row. He's shown it in his videos. He's taking more credit than he deserves. He's calling himself a world champion when he's not. That's a big fucking deal because that's like stolen valor for athletes. That's a big fucking deal, right? If anybody asks me what karting championships I've won, I'll be straight up and say I've never been in an official race. Sander taught me how to race, and I'm a novice at best, right? I'll be dead ass about it. With rowing, same thing, right?
Yeah, you have to be. Yeah.
You have to be. So that's stolen valor, and that's fucked up.
That'd be like telling people that I went to Super Nationals in Las Vegas just because I got my license in order to qualify me for it, which I did get the license. I was one of 200 people. I think, the only first-year shifter kart rookie that year, potentially. I don't know that for a fact. But I got it. The turnaround time was relatively quickly. I had a lot of support for it. I had a lot of good references, and I got my license for it. Did I go? No, I just had my supercar license to go.
Yep.
Right. But I'm not going to tell people that I participated in it because it's just factually not true.
Exactly. I medaled at regionals in high school rowing twice. And when you medal at regionals, you qualify for nationals, right? But if you aren't in the 1V boat, so like the fastest boat, the 1V has to qualify in order for the 2V to qualify, right?
Yeah.
And both years I medaled was in the 2V, and the 1V didn't qualify that year. They finished 5th both years. So I wasn't able to go to nationals even though I qualified, right? I don't ever claim to have gone to nationals or be a national competitor, right? It sucks that I didn't get to go. I actually didn't know that that was the case until I graduated and learned more about the system. Because in the moment, you're like, oh, I medaled awesome, and like, whatever, right? I didn't even know that I could go to nationals at the time.
Got it.
But the stolen valor is a big fucking deal, right? But so far, all reasons to not hire him, right? But there's no real nail in the coffin. And so when I Googled his name, one of the first things that came up was a Reddit thread where someone was asking about him because 7 years ago, someone made a post on Reddit that said, hey, this Miroslav guy was hired for my team. Some things aren't lining up. He's not really explaining himself very well. We don't understand what he's saying. And it's just been an odd couple of months. Does anyone have experience with this guy? And there were a bunch of people on there who were like, yeah, he's weird, he's phony, he didn't actually become a world champion, et cetera, like kind of saying things similar to what I had found in my background research. But I was hoping that if I could reach out to some of these people, they would be willing to talk to me outside the app, confirm that they were on a team and did coach for him, and, talk to me about their rowing background, as a trusted source. If I saw a post about one of my previous coaches, I would do the same thing, right? And so I revived that post and I said, hey, bumping, does anyone have any experience? My team is considering hiring him and, I want to learn more. And I didn't get any responses on that, probably because it was 7 years old. I DM'd those people. One of the guys got back to me, but he wasn't willing. He was like, I didn't have a ton of experience with him, but I, would just be careful. It's like, do a background check. And I was like, okay. And so I made my own post, right? And it read very clear. It was like, hey, my team is considering hiring this guy. We're seeing stuff online that isn't lining up. Does anybody have experience with him and can confirm some of the things that he's claiming, right? And I got a bunch of comments on the post about people who were like, this is unprofessional, or this is a hit piece, or whatever, right? And a couple people were like, I mean, if his resume isn't lining up, don't worry about it. And most people assumed that I was a kid making the post, and they were like, just let the adults handle it. They'll know. If the stuff on his resume doesn't line up, they won't hire him. Don't worry about it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm here to collect information, not talk shit, not to share any of the claims that I've made, because that doesn't belong on Reddit. I can do it in my podcast, right? I don't need to do any of that. I'm here to collect information because this is a recon mission. It's a background check. So I didn't say anything. I didn't upvote or downvote any of the comments, and I didn't reply at all, right? Apparently, Misha found that post and made a Reddit account. So someone in his life must have seen it. It's the first thing that comes up when you Google his name.
Yeah.
And referred it to him. So he made a Reddit account and went off. He made a comment or two replying to every single comment on the post from 7 years ago and the one that I made. And then he made a new thread that was like, this is Misha. If you want to talk about anything, let's do it face to face. Bring it up here, right? That post has no comments on it. But I have a few examples from some of the other threads. So there's a thread here where Misha says, they know who I am. My name is public on World Rowing, aka the coach. Anonymous person says, OP is probably a kid who fears being held to standards, or an assistant coach, either with similar fears or a grudge for being skipped over. And Misha goes, I am not a kid, 20 plus years of world-class coaching experience. And the other guy goes, you are not OP, original post author. And Misha goes, I am the guy they're talking about. And he goes, great. Not relevant to my original comment about OP. And then Misha says, here we go. You question my coaching? Say it to my face with the sunglass emoji, since you are so brave. And the anonymous guy says...
He wasn't even targeting Misha. He was targeting you, the original poster.
Yeah. And so the anonymous guy goes, oh, God. The anonymous guy goes, don't know you, didn't question your coaching, starting to get an idea of why we're all here. Dude, that is starting to get an idea of why we're all here has stuck with me and Grace for like the past 3 weeks.
That's good.
It's become a regular part of my vernacular. So here's the other and more severe example, right? Someone made a comment that was like, don't hire this guy. He has known about a child abuse situation happening at his rowing program for months, and he hasn't said anything about it. And I was like, wow, that's a serious claim, not validated at all. I'm not taking any of the information from the Reddit posts into my document. I'm not putting any of it under consideration if I can't verify it. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a Reddit shit post from an anonymous account. And, that was just going to be the way that it was. Since Misha found the post, he replied to it. And he was like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. This is fucked up. And the guy was like, why didn't you go to Safe Sport, which is the governing organization that protects student athletes? And he was like, why didn't you go to Safe Sport? Why don't you say anything about it? Why don't you do something about it? And Misha was like, basically calling the guy out, confirming that he knew the guy and was familiar with the situation. And he was like, so here's another example. I made the post on the 7-year-old post, and I said, reviving this post, my rowing team is interviewing for a new coaching position, and Miroslav is under consideration. Can anyone give me more info or references on him? We are reading conflicting reports at the moment. Misha says, you can ask Miroslav, aka me, about anything you would like to know in person on the phone. In person on the phone is an interesting contradiction. So then anonymous person who previously made the claim about the Safe Sport thing said, it's not too late to go to the authorities and Safe Sport, Misha. Stop claiming to be a pious person and a proponent of athletes' positive mental health if you're going to continue to be complicit. And then Misha replies with 3 laughing faces and says, good job, James. Hope you sleep well at night with all the BS you have going on, etc. Say it to my face. That's right, you can't. So you write BS on here. Say hi to Safe Sport for me. For you, I am genius. You can't touch me. I do what I want, not what some retard like you tell me. Hashtag my way. Confirming that the situation is legitimate, outing the other Reddit poster, who is not a public figure, I'm assuming, I don't know, right? Misha is a public figure. So later on when the board got on my ass, Misha makes himself a public figure by posting himself all over Instagram and advertising his company using his face, right? It's not a service he's selling, it's his personality and his abilities. So it's okay to make a post asking about Miroslav Zvezdanov in the same way it would be okay to make a post about Max Verstappen, right?
Yeah.
But here he's outing James, who is under an anonymous Reddit account, hasn't said his own name or anything like that, insulted him, said, say hi to Safe Sport for me, which is fucking wild. That's like working at a blue collar work and then saying like, say hi to OSHA for me, right? That's a serious fucking accusation. Calling him a retard and then saying that that's his hashtag my way. So he says, use the Misha method and hashtag my away as synonymous terms, right? And so I was like, wow, that's fucking scathing. So I haven't made any posts on any of this, although I've really wanted to. I haven't. I've refrained to try to maintain professionality, right? After Misha found these posts, he emailed the Space Coast crew board of directors and was like, fuck you guys, I'm out. I'm out of the interview process. I'm not under consideration anymore. I'm revoking my application. This is unprofessional, right? And so then every single board member replied in that email thread and was like, this is so unprofessional. This is ridiculous. If you, my Reddit name is late Apex 39, right? If you are late Apex, you need to take the post down immediately and come forward. And everyone got up on their high horse and was like, whoever this is needs to confess to their sins, right? And so I replied and I was like, hey everyone, I'm late Apex. No hidden anything here. There's nothing commit. One of the ladies in the group chat said Late Apex is a book written about a post-apocalyptic world with political undertones, and it's very concerning, right? Do you know what the first fucking thing is when you Googled the term late Apex?
Yeah, it's a diagram drawing of a late Apex around a corner.
Of a fucking racing line. Do you know what my profile photo is on Reddit?
Probably racing.
It's the manual shift pattern for a car. So you can really easily link those things together, right? So this woman's done less research into my Reddit profile than she did on the candidate that we're interviewing, which is concerning in itself. But they all started posting in this email thread, and I was like, I'm late Apex. I made the post because I'm working on this document of all this information I'm putting together, and I'm looking for sources, right? Note, I'm not using any sources that are anonymous. I'm not including any of that in my documentation. I don't need any anonymous Redditors hurling insults to conflict with all of the hard fact that I have, right? But I am looking for firsthand accounts. I have several from people who can prove that they were coached by Misha in the past, right? Or have worked with him.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking for more things like that, right? I like to think that there are Redditors out there who would be okay sharing their, their account as being not anonymous, right? Very clearly, I'm okay opening up with mine. I'm late Apex 39. If you've seen me post anything, it's Mason Yaskovic, right? So I would hope that other people would be willing to do the same. And I think that's valid. And so everyone started blowing up the texting chat and was like, Mason has to take this down. This is ridiculous. And I was like, I'm not going to deal with all of the insults, right? I'm just going to, I sent my email reply. If people have an issue with it, they can read my email and send it back to me. It's a longer email, so they're probably not going to all read it, right? And sure enough, I got an email back from another board member that was like, in my first paragraph, I made a recommendation for who I think we should hire and why. And then I went on to detail why I think Misha's not a good candidate. And so I said, I strongly recommend XYZ. And then this board member said, Mason, we strongly request that you take down the Reddit post, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And I was like, I don't feel like he really read the rest of my email. Because at this point, I had sent the whole document with all the evidence that I had that I talked about at the beginning of this, right? And he was super heated. And he was like, I speak for most of the board members when we're irate. This is strongly unprofessional. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our interview candidates. We conduct ourselves professionally, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I read that whole email. And I was like, all right. Should I respond to this right now or not? Because everyone still seems pretty heated. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe this isn't professional. I didn't see an issue with it at first take, but maybe I'm wrong. And maybe I should take the post down, right? And then I thought about it and I was like, if I am wrong, I definitely don't want to take the post down. Because if I made a mistake, I don't want to cover up my mistakes. I want to own them, right? And so if I did make this mistake, I want people in the future to go back and see that mistake and then ask me about it and then have me say, yes, I recognize that this was a mistake, but I'm not in the industry of hiding my mistakes, right? And then I thought about it and I was like, well, I'm on a board, right? So this could reflect poorly on the rest of the board. And I don't want it to reflect poorly on the rest of the board if I am wrong. So maybe I should put my name in there to clarify. And I was like, okay, if I can determine that this was an incorrect action that I shouldn't have taken, I'm going to edit the post and I'll say that Mason Yaskovic owns this account. It's me, and it's not, reflective of the rest of the board, and that it's my mistake, and I'll own it. But either way, I'm not taking the post down, right? And so I started talking to other people in my life. I asked you, I asked Grace, I asked one of our friends at the Kava Bar who's pretty high up at an airport. I asked Tyler, a business owner. I asked my boss at work who has a background in ethics. I asked my dad who hires hundreds of people, right? And everybody synonymous across the board was like, I don't think you did anything wrong. The post you said didn't mention any names apart from Misha, who's a public figure. You didn't make any accusations. You didn't bring up any evidence. You were just asking for feedback, right? Misha conducted himself like an ass in the comments. And I didn't.
That's on him.
That's on him, right? And someone in the Reddit thread was like, hey, man, regardless of whether or not this is professional, you're making yourself into an ass. And then Misha was like, he did the same response where he was like, you question my coaching? Say it to my face, like that type of shit, right? Yeah. So missing the point entirely. But I went through it all and I was like, no, I think I'm resolute that this was not an incorrect thing to do. And in one of the emails, the hiring manager for the board was like, imagine if you saw a post like this about yourself, where your ex-girlfriend, your past business partners, your past employers could see this and post anonymously. Imagine the things that they would say. And then I thought about it and I was like, that would actually be really nice to have, because then I could see how other people really think about me and, determine if there's a difference between how I view myself, how I conduct myself, and how I'm perceived by others. That would be interesting. Also, I don't know what kind of life you guys lead. I'm not overly concerned about people saying negative things about me because overall I think I'm a pretty good and decent person, right?
Yeah.
And I would have an answer to things. Not everybody has a podcast where you can go and see, into behind the closed doors of someone's life, because we share a lot of personal things on here.
Yeah.
So anybody who watches the podcast has a pretty good understanding of who I am as a person and how I conduct myself. So if someone did make a Reddit post about me, I don't think I'd be fazed. And I definitely wouldn't be saying the types of things that Misha is. And so after considering all that, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to take it down. I'm going to leave it up. I think I did the right thing. And a lot of what his responses are is kind of validating the evidence that I found in my background report. And so the president of the board and the hiring manager asked to call me, and I was like, absolutely. And so we talk on the phone, and they were very professional. I really appreciate, because I know that the hiring manager in particular was pissed at me because he wanted this to go well and he wanted it to be above board and whatever. And
Yeah.
I threw a wrench in the works, right? And so I could tell he was pissed at me, but he was very professional anyways. And so we talked about it, and they started off with being like, fucking dude, like, why would you do this? And so I explained why. And then they were like, okay, well, why did you do it in the manner that you did? And then I explained why. And they were like, all right, well, yeah, it's not professional. And then I argued about how I actually don't think it's unprofessional. And then they were like, okay, you make some decent points, but like, still it's not orthodox. And I was like, I agree it's not orthodox, but I don't think it's uncalled for, especially considering I found so many conflicting things in their resume. And then they were like, well, why didn't you do this type of background check on the other applicants? And I was like, well, because when I read over Misha's resume, there are a lot of things that are concerning in there that I can't personally, validate. But both of the other participants I've known for many years and can probably be the reference that they cite for most of the things on their resume. So I don't have to do that. If you'd like me to, I'm happy to. And they were like, no, it's like, don't, we don't need that. It's okay. But every point that they brought up, I answered honestly. And, I think I kind of changed their perspective a little bit. I think ultimately we walked out of the conversation with everyone's perspective. Like, everyone felt the same going in as they did going out. Everyone felt that they were right. But we all left amicably, and they were like, hey, the rest of the board is really heated right now, and you should probably just like lay low for a little while and step back. And I was like, I'm happy to do that. I'm here to do what the board needs, right? They asked me to come and be a part of the board because I have experience with the sport, and I'm happy to share that experience, right?
Yeah.
They're unhappy with how I've shared my experience in doing this background check, and that's fine. But I'm happy being the only person who actually put in the work to find out about this candidate, because no one else on the board did that.
Yeah.
No one else has put in this energy and effort, right? And so if looking into his LinkedIn and then reaching out to people in his past and then, pulling up the official world rowing records, finding the video of him losing the world championships in 1995, if all that is 99% and then a Reddit post pushes too far to 100%, it's unfair for you to invalidate the 99%, right? I just went a little bit further than you guys would have.
Yeah.
And so, at a certain point during all of that, Grace was like, hey, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, why? And this gets on into the podcast stuff here. If you're ready to get into it, I actually have a read-in for this podcast. So Grace was like, hey, are you okay? And I realized that I have a lot more experience in being in a position where I'm hated than a lot of other people, and I think you do too. So this podcast topic is on how to handle being hated.
Yeah.
Because I've been thinking about it in the past 2 weeks. It's inspired directly by the heat that I caught from the Space Coast Crew board of directors through the whole Misha hiring debacle. And at its peak, I had board members insulting me in a group chat, sending long emails about how unprofessional and unethical it was for me to post on Reddit. And I'll make a dog ear here by saying that you do not have a fiduciary responsibility to interview candidates at all. Even real estate agents don't have a fiduciary responsibility. Means you have to look out for the best interest of your client no matter what.
Right? That would be like a lawyer, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in real estate, there's different types of agreements that a broker, like a real estate agent, can have with a client, right? So if you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy a house tomorrow and I sign on as your agent, right? Well, I'm a transaction broker, meaning I'm going to be a mouthpiece for you. I'm not going to speak for you without getting permission from you first. So I'm not going to go negotiate on your behalf. I'm basically a mouthpiece for you. I represent whatever you want me to represent, right? If you're a single agent broker, That means that you are in a fiduciary relationship where you trust me and I trust you and I can go speak on your behalf, right?
Mm.
And so you do not have a fiduciary responsibility as an interviewer for an interviewee at all, right? Because you're not a part of the organization. And they totally ignored my emails, right? Grace pulled me aside one evening and checked in on me to see how I was doing, and she was surprised when I told her I was just fine. She could see what was being shot my way and was worried it was negatively affecting me. And I reassured her that I had been hated before while you and I ran the SAE team in college, and I've become desensitized to it. And that got me thinking, this is a skill, and it'd be really interesting to dedicate an entire podcast to it. So segment 1, if you're ready to get into it, is on why being hated isn't always a bad thing. Typically, hatred is defined as having and expressing negative, intense emotion toward a thing or person, usually as a result of an action that is seen as negative. That would imply that if you're being hated, you're doing something wrong. But I can think of plenty of occasions where most people thought one person was wrong, only for the majority to be proven wrong. Do you think that being hated by the majority makes your actions socially wrong?
No, definitely not. I think you go down a very dangerous and scary path when you start to look at the populace opinion to determine whether something is right or wrong.
Yep.
That's actually part of my, this is interesting. I just thought of this, but we
Yeah.
talked about morality a long time ago.
Yeah.
And that was part of like my sticking point with like needing objective morality.
Yeah.
Is when it's subjective, it's at the fault of whatever the collective opinion is.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but in terms of being hated, I mean, there's plenty of people who have been, someone, for example, a lot of people really hate Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people do. And like, maybe they're not right about every single thing, but to claim that they are wrong about everything would just be factually false because it's just not true.
People hated Galileo for saying that the sun was the center of the solar system.
Exactly.
Or universe. I guess he was kind of wrong. But
he said it was the center of the universe because he only thought our portion was.
He was less wrong than everyone else at the time.
Yeah,
but he was hated.
But that's the game of science, right? Figuring out the endless iteration of how we can reduce the amount that we're wrong.
You get continuum closer.
Yeah.
Not to compare myself to Galileo. I want to make that clear. I'm not that vain.
I like Newton.
Just only in that I've been hit on the head by things.
But yeah, it's definitely not the case that if you are if you are judged by the populace and hated by the populace that you're wrong. You could be wrong.
Yeah.
But there's been plenty of really strong and important people that have been hated by society who have, made great improvements or sacrifices for the general populace, right?
Yeah.
For example, actually, given today is Easter, if you believe in Christ, that's someone who made the ultimate sacrifice for, all of the people, right?
Yeah.
In that faith, right?
Right.
And, alternatively, there's been plenty of people who were popular who have done evil things.
Yeah.
For example, Hitler was really popular in Germany.
I call him out later. Yeah.
Yeah. People don't, like talking about Hitler in World War II. I find it fascinating. I've been listening to a little bit lately. Like, he was popular in Germany.
Yep.
Really popular.
And a lot of them didn't know about the Holocaust until it was happening.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he was popular while he was, like, persecuting all of these innocent people, and they didn't know that he was doing it at the time. And then after they found out, even some of the soldiers reported, they were like, hey, we just found out that Auschwitz is a thing, and we are, like, now in the middle, like, you can't speak up and say anything, right? So, like, now what are we doing? You're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
And it's tough because you also had SS men who were separate from the traditional military, and you had the traditional military who started to have skepticism about World War II and what they were doing and why.
Yeah.
Then you had the SS men who were literally on methamphetamines
Yep.
and cracked out of their minds, quite literally, enforcing the word of Hitler and what he wanted to do. And so you had the regular military men and then these SS guys cracked out of their minds, enforcing the military to stay in line. Otherwise, you'd just be killed because there's a bunch of meth heads. Quite literally. I mean, this isn't conspiracy. There's very good documentation of this.
Yeah.
But like, that was someone who was popular for a long period of time who, did a lot of evil.
I can even think on a smaller scale of people who are unpopular. Every teenager hates their parents at one point in time, right?
Oh, yeah.
I fucking hated that my parents wanted me home before 11 p.m.
Yeah.
Right? But it's only because like the risk of drunk driving accident skyrockets after 11 p.m. 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. is the highest rate at which drunk driving accidents happen.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I'm glad that I went home early those nights because I didn't fuck my sleep schedule. I didn't end up getting bad grades. I ended up doing well in rowing. I didn't get in an accident. Those are net positives. And if I were a parent, I would impose the same rules, right? But
Yeah.
at the time, I hated them. And I didn't consider why. Right. But I think that there's a very consistent theme of being people who hate other people not dedicating the time to self-reflection.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one more example if
Yeah,
I
sure.
can.
Yeah.
So Andrew Tate is someone that a lot of people hate.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't like his content on social media. A lot of people don't like the way he carries himself, the way he talks, right? Whatever your opinion is, so be it, right? I agree. Some of the stuff he says probably doesn't need to be said and probably is polarizing for no reason.
Yeah.
Right? I get that.
I think
You know?
there is a reason, and I think that reason
Oh.
is that you can monetize polarization.
Right. No,
Well, you're
he talks
totally
about
right.
that. He
You're
talks
totally
about that.
right.
He talks
Yeah.
about how he used polarization in order to monetize it,
Yep,
right?
yep, yep.
When I say no reason for it, I don't think it's constructive to society.
Yes.
Right? That's my point.
Yeah.
But
Unwarranted.
at the same time, he is largely hated by a lot of different people,
Yep.
right? At the same time, he is someone who sponsors a school in Africa for underprivileged kids. He donates $50 million to charity every single year. He has an online program that is way cheap for the value that it brings to help you start in business and get with different peoples and mentors, right? And get with like-minded folk.
Yeah.
Like he facilitates, and like I'm part of that group, the Real World.
Mhm.
It's not like the TikTok, Instagram kind of like every single day. Andrew Tate, Tristan Tate, and Luke, I believe is his cousin. I think I'm getting that right. Maybe not. But anyways, those three guys are like the big figures of the Real World. Every day, 2 to 3, 4 times a day, they're posting stuff of like, keep on going. Like, check out this podcast if you're struggling with this, or like, check this out. Like every single day. It's none of this like Instagram crap that you see that's polarizing. It's like actually helpful content to keep you going, keep you motivated. Like that's value. That's helping people, right? And it's like, I think part of my reason for bringing in that example as well is people will point a finger at one situation or one example or a set of situations and examples without the bigger picture in mind and claim that the smaller subset that they see is an explanation for why this person is terrible, broadly speaking.
Right.
And in that case, like, maybe you disagree with this aspect, but that doesn't mean you can't pull value from over here, right? Like just with Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, right? Just because I disagree with them about, I don't know, something that Candace Owens is going on a deep dive of RFK, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that
Like she doesn't like our affair. She does.
I honestly haven't watched much of the series at all. I've just seen like little clips, but like, let's just say hypothetically, I have no clue whether I agree or disagree with her. I didn't agree with her on her RFK analysis. That doesn't mean that like I can't agree with her on her, analysis of the Biden presidency or, the JFK assassination, right? And I haven't listened to those particular podcasts that she's done on those topics. I've listened to snippets here and there, so I don't have a concrete opinion.
Yeah.
But my point being is that a small thing that you point a finger at isn't an explanation for them broadly speaking, right? And you have to look at things as they are and take value where you can.
It's like the Hormozy quote. It's like you can hate an idea without hating the person who said it.
Yeah. I actually have a Hormozy quote on here.
I have
losers.
5.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of Hormozy this week.
Yeah. Losers focus on winners and winners focus on winning.
Yeah,
Is one of them that I have. Is like, there's going to be a lot of people out there who are just pointing the finger at someone else. And, it doesn't imply exactly in this content winners and losers.
Right.
But they're going to point the finger at like one individual thing instead of just looking at the bigger picture of life and like how they can, either gain value from this person or not take in their information and gain value from someone else. Like, just make that choice there. But to hate someone, I think is like really bold. I don't think there's like a lot of people that I hate or like really anyone, or at least that I can think of.
I think that it takes it a bit far, right?
Yeah.
Because essentially by hating someone, you're saying there's zero redeeming qualities here at all.
Right.
And that seems like it's a bit too far, right?
Yeah.
But even if someone says that toward you, you can kind of take solace in the fact that you're like, you don't even know me well enough to hate me, right? Unless you do. And if you do know me well enough to hate me, then fair play. But I don't know you well enough to think that you can think about me that way.
Was it Conor McGregor who was like, if you have a problem with me, call me. And if you can't call me, you don't know me well enough to have a problem with me.
That's Tom Holland. Yeah.
Tom
He's like,
Holland.
if you don't have my number, you don't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Conor McGregor, I think, said, come here, bitch, be quiet, or something like that. I don't know.
That
But
sounds more like Connor.
yeah. But I have written here that hatred holds no influence over correctness. So plenty of people hate successful people simply for being successful, but it doesn't change the fact that they are and remain successful, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
your hatred doesn't actually impact the situation here. Like the way that you feel, the way that other people feel about me as the person who's being hated doesn't have an impact on the situation, right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's actually, it's interesting you bring that up. I think that's part of the reason why I've become a little bit numb to like these traditionally controversial conversations like the intellect conversation.
mhm.
Is because me feeling uncomfortable about the conversation in regards to intellect and culture and upbringing, how those all impact and play into, what your general walk through life is going to be like, right?
Yeah,
You know, my uncomfortability with the subject does not change the fact and data.
yeah.
So I might as well just look at it at face value and then just take what I will and, continue to research and learn and understand.
Dude, there's a Rick and Morty quote that I just understood because this has been popular for a long time, and I have liked the quote, but I didn't really know the meaning behind it. I just
Mm.
liked the like oomph with which it was said. But Rick at one point says, "Your boos mean nothing to me. I've seen what makes you cheer." Right? And now I recognize that
Mm.
that means you hating me doesn't mean anything because I see what makes you excited and what you like, and that tells me everything I need to know about your character, which is you don't know enough about me or aren't informed enough about the subject for your hatred to matter to me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, you're not significant. If there's someone significant who hates you, that's, like if your idol hates you. Like if I got the opportunity to meet Alex Ramosi, who is one of my, you know,
Someone you look up to.
yeah, there's a name for it. It's not like a mentor or like a idol, but
Um,
um
an inspiration.
sure, let's say inspiration, right? It's one of my inspirations, right? If I had the opportunity to meet him and at the end of the day he was like, "I think I hate you." I'd be really hurt because I look up to him and I appreciate a lot of what he has to say and I feel connected to a
Mm.
lot of what he has. And so that would be hurtful because he means something to me, right?
Yeah.
But if someone who doesn't know me at all tells me that they hate me for an action that I did that I think is viable, then it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
Like you hating me makes my action no more or less correct, right?
Yeah. And I feel like the more like I talk to different people and go through life, the more I realize that I've looked at things for a majority of my life in a single time frame.
Mhm.
I've looked at them in the time frame that I've observed and analyzed the given situations or problems I've encountered based on that time frame I observed them over.
Okay.
But for example, like um when I had the accident in the BMW,
Yeah.
right? I was like, this really sucks. And it did suck,
Yeah.
right? It was a shitty situation
Yeah.
for sure, right? But it also changed my perspective on life, and it changed my perspective on like caring for other people and understanding like just general compassion for other people involved in troubled situations,
Yeah.
which is a benefit, right? If I only look at it in the 3-month time horizon from when the accident happened and then 3 months after that, if I only look at that small snippet, then I'm just going to claim that that was a terrible situation and there was not much to get out of it.
Yeah.
But if I look at it on the broader time horizon, I see that, okay, no, there is value to pull from it. And I feel like a lot of hatred comes from that narrow window where there might be something bigger at
Yeah.
picture here in order to encompass it. Like with the Andrew Tate thing, like he talks about using controversial social media posts or, talking about controversial things or being really, just wild on social media, right?
Right.
And if you just look at that snippet, you're like, oh, this guy's just a dick, right?
Yeah.
But if you kind of see it as, okay, well, he did that in order to get publicity so that he could fund things like this charity program he does and the school that he does and stuff like that, we can debate on whether that's the right approach or the wrong approach. That's one thing to debate. But at the end of the day, like that one snippet of time doesn't make him a bad person because there is other evidence to show that he is doing great things. Right.
Yeah. It's like the Hormozy principle of there is no good or bad, there just is.
Yeah,
Right. So it's like,
exactly. Yeah.
okay, I do a background check on Misha, good, right? I find out that he's a liar, bad. I make a Reddit post and learn more information, good. Other people say that's bad, bad. Misha makes an ass out of himself in the comments and, illustrates that he wouldn't have been a good candidate in the first place, good, right? Turns out that account's fake and not Misha at all, bad, okay. And then we keep going and then you fucking like that is just an, like, good or bad is entirely relative, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so similarly, hatred works that way too, where it's like, how small of a scope are you looking at, right? Um, Everyone has their own preferences, and by design, not everyone will like the same thing. So just because you don't agree with someone else doesn't mean that you have to hate them for it. You can disagree, or you can hate that aspect about them, and you can even hate the person as a whole, right? But how far you take that is up to you and whether or not it serves you, right? Hormozy has another quote that I have written here that people want to see you lose because it helps them justify the risks they chose not to take, right? And I think that can be attributed to hatred too, because I think sometimes people hate other people because it worked for them and they've never tried it. So like a lot of people hate Jeff Bezos. They'll try to say that it's because he uses cheap labor in China or whatever, right? But they wear a Shein bikini because it's an affordable price. So that's not really their issue. The issue with Jeff Bezos is that he dedicated all of his 20s and 30s to work, and now he's a millionaire or a billionaire. Sorry.
Yeah.
And they hate him because he did something that they weren't able to do and is seeing the reward for it. And now he doesn't have to work a day in his life. And so if you're in your 30s and 40s and you didn't dedicate that time to that kind of work, and now you have to go to work every day and you hate yourself for it, you're going to reflect that hate onto Jeff Bezos. You really hate yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. In the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that I'm reading, it talks about how you can choose your actions, but you can't choose the consequences.
That's true.
As like a really integral point of decision making.
Yeah.
And of being proactive in how you make decisions.
Yeah.
I think that's really true with, for example, the Jeff Bezos example. Like, he made the decision to pursue his business and to work really hard and to grind through it, and now he's a billionaire, right? The outcome of that is that he's really wealthy and he's able to continue his projects as he sees fit, and to grow and to learn more and to build his businesses, right?
Right.
The consequences of that is that a lot of people are going to point fingers at him, right? If he never went to do that, people probably wouldn't point fingers at him in the same way, right? But he also wouldn't have the outcome of the action he took, right?
Right.
And so it's this a balance there.
And so in Jeff Bezos' case, I don't think that being hated is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because in Jeff Bezos' case, it signifies that you were willing to do something that no one else was, and that paid off for you.
Yeah.
Right? That's all I have for segment 1.
Well, let me see. I feel like yeah, I think we covered most of what I wrote down through our discussion.
Do you have anything?
But I would say that people naturally lean to judgment.
Yeah.
And people who don't have a good grasp on their ability to socially interact with others, or to listen constructively in conversation, or to actually self-reflect and analyze, tend to lean more into judgment.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what kind of grows a lot of the pointing fingers and hatred that we have in society today. And like the Jeff Bezos example, if you're bold, you're bound to polarize. Right.
Exactly.
In any case, there's just, if you are bold in your claims and your actions, there's bound to be other people that disagree with you. That's just the way of life.
Right. And that's,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, oh, fuck, I just lost my train of thought. What was the quote that you just read?
If you are bold, you are bound to polarize.
Right before that.
People are naturally judgmental.
Yeah, people are naturally judgmental. And I think it's because people are usually more concerned with themselves than with other people. So if someone else is doing well or making a risk or making a judgment, right? When you're watching a Formula One race and someone unexpectedly pits early, right? Immediately you think, why would they do that, right? And then it turns out that they did the undercut and it actually worked out in the end. And you're like, oh, that's a good strategy, right?
Yes.
But immediately it's just, that's change. I don't like change. That's out of the norm. I wouldn't do that. I don't understand it. And so it's bad.
Yeah. I have a personal anecdote.
Sure.
Mine.
Yeah.
So I was racing. This was a long time ago. Call out to Kylo Puzo if you ever see this. But I was racing with him in single speed when I was 17.
Okay.
16 and 17. It was a start of the season, and it had sprinkled and rained earlier that day, and it was starting to dry out, but it was still wet on track.
Yeah.
And most people went out with rain tires. And he was like one of 3 people who put on dry tires.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I'm not going to lie, I definitely wasn't judgmental, but I was questioning. I was like, why would you put on dry tires? And I came up and asked him, I was like, oh, you're going out on dry tires? And he was like, yeah, I think it's going to dry up. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, what would you recommend for me? Because I actually bought my first cart from him. So he was still helping me with some cart stuff.
Yeah.
And he was
like, I recommend you go out on wets. I want to finish ahead.
No, he was a really nice guy. And he was like, honestly, if you're going to go out on wets, I would definitely air them down, because the track is going to dry up and the tires are going to overheat, and you don't want to be at a high pressure going out, even though it might be good for your first few laps.
It's going to be a contact patch.
Yeah. And so I stayed with those rain tires, and I actually ended up passing him in the first few laps on my reins, and I was up in second place. And then he passed me back after the halfway point and ended up winning the race or placing second. I ended up placing fourth because one of the other dry tire guys passed me as well.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you kind of like, it's that initial judgment. You have that character to like initially judge. That's natural for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
it's important to mitigate it and look at the bigger picture, because not everything is so as simple as the one perspective that you perceive for a short amount of time.
And people even do that after the fact too. So like beforehand, you're like, I don't know if I should go out on dries like Kyle. Maybe I should sit wets wherever. And now afterwards, you're like, okay, that would have been a good call. I should have done that. Hindsight's 2020, right? But still, people make that mistake.
Yeah.
2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix with Max and Lewis, right? Nicholas Latifi puts his car on the wall. There's like 6 laps to go. They go behind the safety car. Max pits to go on softs right behind Lewis, right? Everyone talks about how the issue is after that, they only let the cars that were in between them unlap themselves. Not all the cars unlap themselves. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been enough time to do a full racing lap, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And people say that that's the problem. The problem is that they let the unlapped cars pass, right? But when the safety car came out and Max decided to pit in second, right? They didn't know if they were going to have enough time for a racing lap or not. They could have had that car cleaned up in half a lap and they would have been ready to go. They could have had enough time to have all the lapped cars pat. They didn't know. So like the real gamble in that position, the second the safety car comes out, Lewis is ahead on hards, Max is in second on hards, who pits? If Lewis pits, he gets on softs, he's going to go to second, and then he's going to have to overtake Max on the last lap. If Max pits now, he loses nothing and can stay on softs. If Lewis goes in, Max will probably stay out and defend. If Max goes in, he's going to come back out in the same spot on the tire advantage, right? So isn't it better for Lewis to pit in either scenario? Because either they both pit and they both come out on equal tires, or Lewis pits and then comes back out on the faster tires and has the racing opportunity. Mercedes took the gamble in saying, we bet it's probably going to finish behind the safety car, right? That's a gamble because they didn't know at that time, right?
Yeah.
And still, when people go back in Abu Dhabi, they don't consider that it was actually a fucking strategic masterclass by Red Bull to pit Max to put him on the soft, and a total blunder by Mercedes to leave Lewis out on the hards, right?
Yeah.
That was a gamble that Mercedes knew and took. Either they both pit for softs and come out and it's fair racing and they get a racing lap or finish in order, or Lewis pits, then Max is out on the hard tires and Lewis has the soft tires. They each had that opportunity and Max's team seized it, right? But still, when people go back and look at that race, they say that the issue is with the safety car and not the strategy, right? And even still, like, people overlook that it was really at its core a pit strategy fumble by Mercedes.
Yeah, that is interesting too.
But people are really quick to hate even Max, right?
Oh, yeah.
And like, it's hard to hate Max or Lewis in that race because they both did a great job, right? Even over the course of the whole season, neither of them were perfect, right? They were both close, but it was hard racing, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
Like, I love the rocket powered Mohawk TikTok. I think you sent me, where it was like he was talking about how, like, everyone, talks about how Lewis should have been quicker because he had the fastest car in like 2023, I think it was, or whatever. Like, he should have been.
When Lewis should have been quicker?
Or it was like 2022, or it was back a few years. I'm not good with the timeline.
Keep talking and I'll tell you.
Anyways, they were like, Lewis should be like beating Max. Like, he's the defending, he's world champion, and like he should be beating Max. Like, it's crazy that Max in the inferior car is like putting up a fight and like winning some races against Lewis, blah 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 blah. And rocket powered Mohawk was like, you guys are arguing that Lewis should have been beating Max more and like he should have been doing better and blah, 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 blah. When the only two people actually racing for first place the entire season were Max and Lewis, when every single other person on the grid was nowhere in sight.
Yeah.
Like let that sink in. You know what I mean? It's like, that was people look at this tiny window and be like, why is it? And it's like, hold on.
Yeah.
Both of these guys are destroying every single other greatest racing driver in the world besides Lance Stroll, and like, you're trying to claim that this guy should just be better or do a little bit better here or there. Like, look at the bigger picture here. Both of these guys are really friggin' good. Yeah. And they're fighting it out and they're having a good season.
Yep. And then they're quick to say that it's just the car, right?
Yes.
It's like, oh well, all in from 2017 to 2021, Lewis, had Bottas as a side driver, and like Lewis had a better car advantage than Max did in 2023, and then Max won 19 out of 22 races.
Yeah.
So you can say it's down to the car, and then you can say it's down to the driver. But at the end of the day, it's just can they put the laps together or not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But people are quick to hate and they're quick to judge in the moment and then afterward, right? So like
Yeah.
like earlier today, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix just happened. Max started on pole. The Red Bull is the 4th fastest car this year. There are 6 drivers ahead of Max Verstappen, right?
Okay.
Both McLarens, both Mercedes, arguably both Ferraris, right? Like the Red Bull is not the fastest car by a fucking margin, right? And his teammate's always going to be behind Max because Max is, one of the greatest of all time. So there's arguably 6, if not at a fucking minimum 4 cars individually that should be ahead of him, right? So like on paper, Max shouldn't be finishing higher than 5th in any race at all, right?
Yeah.
But he fucking pulled the lap out of his ass and put it on pole yesterday. And then this morning he started Oscar Piastri started 2nd and had the inside line into turn 1, right? They were alongside each other as they went into turn 1. Max did what he normally does, which is rolls off the brakes when he realizes that it's going to be like, oh, he pushed me off track moment, right? Oscar does take the full width of the track. Max cuts the corner, keeps the lead. He gets a 5-second time penalty, right? And so now everyone is really quick to hate on Max or the stewards or one or the other by saying like, oh, well, Max should have given the position back or he shouldn't have gone off track and held the advantage at all in the first place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a ton of hate, but it doesn't really run that deep.
Yeah.
It's like lap 1, turn 1, going into that corner, they are both alongside each other.
Yeah.
Like if Max stayed his course, they would have both crashed, right? And when Max started to bleed off the brakes and cut the corner, Oscar could see that, and so it took the full track width, right? So there's no reason to hate anybody here, right? If anybody, Max should hate the stewards for making the call, right? But the fans aren't going to say it. The fans are going to be like, oh, Max has given everything to him, and like now that he's not in the fastest car, he's not winning anything. But it's like he finished 2nd today.
Yeah. People are so fast to judge.
They are, yeah, and I think it's largely because,
Did he finish 2nd by position or by the time penalty?
by position. He had to take the 5-second penalty in the pits.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Yeah. So he came out and so he led the race for the first half, and then after the one pit stop that they took, he took the penalty and then he finished 2nd on the lead. But still, like fucking fantastic drive.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's my segment 1.
Cool. That's it for me. Yeah.
So for segment 2, we have how to self-reflect and know that the hatred is deserved. Not caring about how other people feel about you and your actions, regardless of circumstance, can easily fall toward ignorance. Not allowing the thoughts and feelings of others to deter you from your goals is an important skill to have if used properly. Here's a great firsthand example. Abraham Lincoln received a lot of hate for the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed slaves in America. Adolf Hitler received a lot of hate for the murder of over 11 million victims in the Holocaust. I gotta find my page. Hang on. One of these men self-reflected on his position and decided that it was the right thing to do, though not socially popular, and would be worth taking the hate. The other incited World War II. This is a fantastic example of how critical self-reflection is in yet another application. One of our previous podcasts was on self-reflection. So for you, have you ever found yourself on the receiving end of hatred and found after self-reflection that you might have actually deserved it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I've had several friends over the course of time, not necessarily hatred, but come at me with like, "Hey man, I think what you're doing is really dumb." You know,
We should paint the bedroom.
that was a good joke.
Yeah.
Good one. But I've definitely had, for example, one of the things that like Sammy kind of pushed on me. This was a while ago. Not really pushed on me, but she made me question was like, why do you drink so much kratom?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really have a great answer. I was like, well, I like it and it helps me focus. And I feel like if I don't have it, I wouldn't focus as well and get as much done. And like, I just don't feel like this is the time for me to quit.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, okay. But then at the same time, I was like, that's a really shitty reason. Like that's like for me to just say like, oh, like I've just been doing it and, like,
So I'm going to keep doing it.
so I'm going to keep doing it. Like,
Yeah.
that's a bad reason. You know what I mean? Especially when it's like not free.
Yeah.
And so like I thought about that and it wasn't like a direct criticism or hatred, but it did make me think and self-reflect.
Mhm.
Right. It was like a more recent-ish example.
Yeah.
I've definitely had friends come up to me, in high school and in college who are like, hey man, like I think you're you're overreacting about this test grade or this essay grade, like, kind of step back a little bit, you know what I mean? Or like, I might be hating someone, like, hating an assignment or something like that.
Mhm.
And someone else might be like, hey, you know, I know you hate this assignment, but like it's not gonna take too long. I'll help you out with it. It's gonna be all good, right?
Mhm.
Like in high school or whatever.
Yeah.
But there there have definitely been times where I've felt I've definitely been hated before. I think
Trish.
that yeah, definitely been hated before. Um, I'd say that a majority of that hatred I took as constructive criticism
Mhm.
and applied some of it in order to make my, how I convey myself or how I carry myself improve that aspect of myself. And then some of it I analyzed and said, okay, I think this is just out of emotional anger. I don't really know if this is factually based. We saw a lot of that together on Formula SAE,
Yeah.
where there were everyone, like I said earlier, I hate it when people, give advice about business things because everyone's got an opinion about what you should do with your business, right? But like with Formula C, everyone had an opinion about what was the right move with what about the car or, the competition or whatever. And, sometimes the decisions that we had to make were unpopular with a majority of the group. And sometimes they were relatively popular with the majority of the group. It was kind of like give and take. And um there were times where, you know, I think maybe I carried myself a little bit too boldly, or maybe I overstepped and made someone feel, there were times where we made specific people feel as though they weren't doing work when they genuinely weren't doing work. But then there was times where maybe I made someone feel bad where they were actually like a good member and like actually helping out, and I just pushed a little bit too hard on them and I made them feel bad, and like I shouldn't have really done that because like overall, broadly speaking, like they're doing great work, right?
Right.
And so there's like learning in there in that sense. And people will give you, I think that what I've learned over the years is that people will hate and people will like, and you just kind of got to be able to center yourself around your beliefs and values and
Mhm.
understand whether you're aligned to them or not.
Yeah.
Use the different perspectives and inputs of different people around you as reflection points.
Yeah.
And then you got to analyze, okay, I have a reflection point with this friend. Is this mirror really distorted and tainted and not a reflection of who I actually am? Or is this mirror pretty clear and like they probably got a point?
Right.
Right. And kind of figuring out there, like, okay, how are the actions I took aligned with my values and beliefs, or how are they not aligned with my values and beliefs, and how do I feel about that?
Yeah.
Right. And what am I going to do about it, most importantly, right?
Right.
More than feeling about it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that you can discuss some of the Formula SAE stuff and other stuff on your end as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest one that I took away from what you just shared was the making people feel bad when they were actually genuinely doing a good job.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I would have changed a single thing about how I conducted myself with the SAE team, good and bad, because I think it was a great learning experience
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
people very rarely have the potential, like you very rarely have the opportunity to actually lead a team,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that grabbing the bull by the horns and maybe being a bit more bold than I should have been is a leadership flavor that I quite take to, right? But in hindsight, I kind of feel like we were the Jos Verstappen, the one like the dad that's never really proud, but like you just do a good enough job, you know? Like even when kids on our team would do a great job, we would be like, dude, this is awesome. Let's do this next. And like we didn't
Yeah.
celebrate the victory very often because it was always like you never exceed expectations, you only meet them, and then we're ready for you to
Yeah.
do the next thing. And if
But
you fall
also,
short on that,
like, we ate, slept, and breathed this entire project.
and that's the
Like, that
problem.
was everything for
But
us, right?
that's the problem
know?
is that, like, we set this really high expectation that no one else had signed up to and was, like,
Yeah.
ready to meet. And so, like, even when they were fulfilling what was on paper expected from them, it was still like, "Well, he's not doing as much as we are, so he should probably step it up." Right?
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that level setting those expectations early on would be better, but ultimately, I think the output of that is we just need to if we're ever gonna build a team like that again, it has to be a team of killers who are as committed or more committed than we are.
Yeah.
And we can't work with people who are, half on board.
Yeah, there was this is I'm pulling this from, like, 2 years ago, but I saw this entrepreneur, I don't know what his name was, but
Mhm.
he was talking at a convention, and there was someone in the crowd who was talking about how they can't get their employees to like really work on the mission and the goal and blah, 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 blah.
Oh, I remember this.
And the guy up on the stage was like, you are expecting your employees to love your business more than you do. And it's like, that will probably never be the case,
Right.
you know, and you gotta learn to manage people in their designated spots so that they have missions and goals that they can outline and conquer and achieve, but you can't expect every single person as an employee to be like a CEO. It's
Right.
just impossible.
Right.
And so, you know, that kind of comparison was interesting. I think it ties into what we're discussing on Formula C in regards to, you know, just outlining expectations and understanding that not everyone is going to have the same commitment level as you, and you got to take it with a grain of salt and analyze it, self-reflect, and go from there.
I think you make really great points. And in reflecting on the SAE experience in particular, I think that, you know, when we were most hated is probably when we were demanding the most from other people, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's when we were hated the most. And it wasn't because we were berating people, because I think that Frank was probably more, he probably hated us more when we asked him to complete assignments than when we beat him up over the painting the intake manifold, right?
Yeah.
As fucking retarded as painting the intake manifold was, and as hard as we grilled him about it, right? I think he was more upset when he laid out the wiring harness on the table, and then we were like, okay, so when are you gonna like label the sensors? And then he's like, okay, well, I'm getting to that, but like, you know, I just hit this milestone, right? And like when for us, hitting a milestone is like hitting the
Hit a
little
milestone at 4 in the morning on a Tuesday every fucking week. You know what I mean? It's like
hitting a milestone for most people is like a moment to breathe and like relax for a second and reflect on the work they just did. But hitting a milestone for us is like hitting that little rainbow patch in a Mario Kart track where it gives you a super boost, right?
yeah,
It's like when you hit a milestone, it's like, let's fucking go. Like this is when I dig deep,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And for most other people, they have to dig deep to get to the milestone.
Yeah.
And I think that
I think we have to dig deep to get to the milestone too, but we see it as a beacon of light to get to the next one, right?
Yeah.
Whereas other people see it as a rest stop.
Yeah.
We see it as like oh, I got to this lamp, but I see the one over there. I'm going to go to that one too. Whereas
Exactly.
other people was like, oh, I really like this lamp. Oh, and there's like a little shack over there. I'll go chill out there for
Right.
a while.
Well, in terms of peaks and valleys, it's like when we crest one peak, we're motivated to get to the next one, right?
Yeah.
And so then we dig deep to start that journey, and then we dig deep in the valley, and then when we're almost to a milestone, it's not even digging because it's kind of coasting because we're almost at the milestone, which we know is going to amplify us to the next one, right? But for most people, they do all of their digging at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah.
Right. And then they barely get to the top and then they coast down and then they dig again. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that we just had like a little bit more grit and a little bit less personal lives that year, you know, to dedicate to the team.
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit is
a lot.
playing it softly.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But in terms of the hatred, I think that a lot of the hatred toward us for SAE was maybe exaggerated. Because, like, when I look back, I think, okay, we did have high expectations, but we clearly articulated those high expectations and we led by example. And a lot of the stuff that we did ask from the team wasn't nearly as much as us. Like, we weren't asking the same from anyone else.
No, not even close.
Yeah.
And most of the stuff that we were asking for was assignment based.
Exactly.
And it was still delayed and crappy.
Exactly. It's like even when people executed on the things we asked them to do, it still sucked.
Yeah.
Right. And we just weren't afraid to call that out.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good thing and a positive that I take from that. So
Fair.
A lot of the hatred that we got from the SAE team, when I look back on it, I go, oh, well, you know, I think we were in the right for most of those, right? There were a few times where we called people out where we maybe could have been more lenient. There were other times as well that I probably, if I could go back, would be more brash. Like when Trish got on her ass about the arrow thing, a lot of her excuse was, I've been working on it and you guys keep asking me about it. And my response to that is, well, if you've been working on it, where's any of the proof? Right?
Yeah, where is any of the work?
And where is any of the work, right? So at the time, I was like, okay, I didn't know that you've been working on this. Moving forward, we'll communicate more clearly, right? And then she went on to do jack shit. So she took advantage of us in that point, and we let her do it. So now I know going forward, if you don't have proof, then I'm gonna like fucking beat you up about it, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times I was hated, probably, you know, with more credit, was in high school. Because I was kind of an asshole in high school, and I kind of liked that person. Like I liked being the bold guy who said bold things and wasn't very popular. I was kind of a dick at times. You know, I think that I was still a good person, but I think I was just less politically correct and less apologetic about it. You know, And although my positions were usually valid, I just wasn't very graceful in my conduct, right? And I still slip from time to time, like dealing with road rage or incompetent people. I get upset, but I've gotten a lot better about it.
What gets me is slow walkers in the middle of the sidewalk.
That's slow drivers for me. It's the same shit.
Yeah.
Dude, people at the grocery store with the carts in the middle of the aisle, I'll hit their cart. I don't slow down to
Those
walk by.
people.
I'll hit their cart, and they always apologize. They're like, "I'm sorry." And I'm like, "No problem." Because, like, genuinely, it's not, right? But you're not going to stand, or people at Target who are walking the wrong way down the aisle, right? Like, I don't know if you know this, but in the major aisles, as you're like, going around the store, you stay to the right, like in a highway, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there are people who walk the wrong way down. I will hit them head on and make them move because you don't follow the right hand rule.
But it's pretty funny to picture right now.
Yeah, Grace knows. Grace is embarrassed when we walk around a store. And then I go, they should know. It's follow the right hand rule, right? It's the same with boating, right?
Yeah.
But in any case, I think today a lot of my attitude is expressed when others are wrong and less when I'm right. So for the road rage example, I'll vent about how that guy drifted into my lane going 30 miles an hour slower than me. What an idiot. Rather than, did you see how well I controlled the car swerving around that guy? Man, I'm awesome, right? It's less vanity towards myself and more pure hatred against other people, right? So when I do experience emotion, it's not like when I do experience hatred, it's usually solely on the other person and saying, man, that was a fuck up. Like that was an irrefutable fuck up on their part, and less vanity towards myself. I think that what bothers me about a lot of political hate is that there's an unsaid implication that that person is doing something wrong and I've never done that. I'm better than them, right? And that's what really drives me. It's that we did a podcast on it. What was it called? It's like yeah, it's like hypocriticism or oh fuck, what's it called? Virtue signaling. It's that.
Yeah.
Right? It's not only are you doing something wrong, but I've never done that, and so I'm better than you. And that's what drives me nuts.
Yeah.
So I think that, my conduct has gotten a lot better, right? In that I don't derive the same joy from insulting people, who maybe don't deserve it entirely as I used to. Like the whole 2020 election cycle, right? I was like hardcore, like let's go Brandon, like, the MAGA hat and everything. And like any opportunity I could bring up an insult or like a snide remark, I would, even if it kind of wasn't called for. Like people would be like, dude, we're eating dinner. What are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
this isn't necessary, right? We're not having this conversation right now.
Yeah.
And I didn't care because I thought it was funny and I laughed at my own jokes, and that's okay, right? Some people are going to be like that. Not everyone's going to be your friend. A lot of people who didn't like me then might like me. I actually just ran into a girl at the gym the other day who I wasn't the nicest to in high school. Her name is Mariah. She was our coxswain for the TV on my high school rowing team. And this is a similar scenario where I was very driven to bring that boat to medals. And she was there because she enjoyed it, not because she wanted to, compete at like, a national level or go to college and do it or whatever.
Yeah.
She liked it because she liked it, right? But as a coxswain, it's easy to upset everybody at the same time. Steering rowing boats is not easy to do, especially in high school when the rowers don't actually know what they're doing. And so I remember there was one race that we entered that it was hands down, we were going to crush them. Like when we went into the race, we weren't talking about whether or not we would medal. We were betting on how much the winning margin would be. And we went into that race, and fucking 5 strokes into the race, she steered us into buoys and tangled up the oars. And we ended up, I don't think we medaled that race, right? We
Wow.
should have won that race, right? It was a minor race. It wasn't like a huge deal. It wasn't a qualifying race for another event, but every race mattered to me at that level. And I was fucking furious about it. And at the time, I don't think I said anything to her face. I mean, I expressed my, frustration in the boat, but that's kind of like when racing drivers swear on the radio. It's like while you're in the heat of passion, right?
What a ridiculous rule they got now.
Yeah,
with
I
that.
mean, Max said it today. Normally when he wins races, he goes, "That was simply lovely," right? Today they were like, "Max, you got a 5-second time penalty for that turn 1 incident." He goes, "Oh, that's fucking lovely, isn't it?" But we don't know if he's getting fined yet. But I definitely didn't speak, highly of her after that, and I regret a lot of my conduct because it's similar to the SAE style of things where the expectations aren't the same. I'm in there as a rower expecting to compete at the highest level that I can, and there are other people on the same team who are there just because they enjoy it and they don't care if they go to college to do it or not, right? And that's unclear communication on my behalf to the coxswains and the coaches, right? And I corrected that in the years following, right? She and I were friendly, but we definitely weren't very close after that, just because I was so, pissed off by it. But we ran into each other at the gym the other day, and she came over and said hi, and she was very pleasant, and I was very pleasant, and we got along pretty well. And so she was like, hey, does your girlfriend like the gym? Because I don't have anyone to hang out with. And I was like, dude, Grace doesn't have anyone to hang out with. This is great. So we're all going to go out to dinner next week, and I'm going to introduce her and Grace, and maybe they'll be friends from now on, right? But I'm really happy because she clearly doesn't harbor like a huge amount of hatred or regret over that situation like I do, because she came over and said hello.
Yeah.
And I'm excited because I'm now getting the opportunity to showcase growth, right? And I genuinely have since then, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you seen you know who Jeffrey Dahmer was, right?
Yep.
The serial killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't like where this comparison's going.
No, I'm not comparing him to you in any way. He had a trial where a lot of his victims' parents and family members spoke
Yeah.
at the trial.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to watch. There's one clip of the father of one of the daughters who goes up, and he said something like, you know, I think that the things that you've done are terrible, and I think that there are enough people here to have made that known to you, and so that you understand that. And he came at it from the religious perspective. He was like, my religion compels me to forgive. And so I want you to know, although I'm deeply saddened by the loss of my daughter, that I forgive you. And that presentation and looking at the interactions between Jeffrey Dahmer and this father, it was really interesting. And it very much showcased like how powerful like forgiving someone genuinely can be, right? And like, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer, I don't know if I think he got locked up forever. I don't think he was.
He was killed in prison.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he went to jail for life, and then he was killed there.
Yeah. But you know, it's moments like that really bring perspective to like, man, if that father can forgive him for that, you know, killing his daughter and whatever else happened, like I can forgive the person for, you know, making me upset at work or whatever, or like, you know, saying something that was rather rude and I didn't like, you know,
Interesting.
like if he has the willpower to be able to forgive something like that and get up in front of all the other parents who just spent, you know, 10 minutes apiece absolutely tearing apart Jeffrey Dahmer, you know, if he can get up in front of all those people and all the jury and the judge and Jeffrey Dahmer and say that, like, I can forgive this menial thing. You know what I mean? Like,
that's interesting because I look at that as cope. I look at that man as kind of a bitch for saying that.
Interesting.
Because I don't think there's a very specific reason why, which is I'm looking forward to the opportunity to showing Mariah that I've grown since then, and I understand the situation better, and I wish that I could have conducted myself differently, right? And that I express regret for the way that I behaved, and that I recognize that it wasn't professional, and I can do better, and it will do better, and I am a better person now, right? And so I would hope that she has the opportunity to forgive me for that there, right? Jeffrey Dahmer didn't express any regret. He was locked in, didn't understand, like he fucking had no remorse, right? So I think that having the power to forgive, like if Jeffrey Dahmer broke down into tears and was apologetic and was like, I'm so sorry, like
yeah, he did cry in that video.
Oh, he did?
It was interesting, yeah.
Okay, got it. I didn't think that he ever expressed any remorse.
I think it was the only time that he expressed like any.
Got it.
Was in that video.
And I think that
I'm not a professional on the trial. And,
yeah,
you know, I don't know. This is just one.
I think that if somebody expresses regret for their actions and apologizes, then you open the door to have someone forgive you. But I think that if you like murder and eat people and then don't express any remorse about it, and then you have someone forgive you, that's a bitch move. Because like I've done nothing to extend an olive branch.
Yeah.
Right. So like you shouldn't either. Right.
Yeah. I just think it's. I understand where you're coming from. Sometimes I go at it from the perspective of maybe I need to be the first one to extend the olive branch. Maybe I need to just let them know that that it's okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's cool. You know what I mean? But also, you know, allow the other person to see and understand why what they said or did was hurtful and rude. Forgive them, but allow them to understand and learn from their mistake. You know, like, that's kind of how I've started to meld to see it. But like, honestly, I don't have like a great take on it yet. And it's a constant evolution of trying to understand. But
I think when someone cuts you off in traffic, that's a great exercise, right? So like the other day I was driving behind someone and we were going to miss a red light because he wasn't moving. And so I honked my horn at him. I didn't lay on it. I just went like beep, like just a tap, just to, hey, let you know, right? And he rolled his window down and like took his whole torso out of the car and turned around. He was like, bro, your window down, get out of the car. Let's go. Whatever. Right. Like he was upset. And at the time, I was totally in the right. The light was green. He wasn't moving, right?
Yeah.
And so I could have gotten out of the car and beat him up, right? Or I could have waited for him to come over to my car and shoot him. I didn't want any of that. I wanted to de-escalate the situation because he is wrong in traffic and clearly belligerent and, negligent to the fact that he's doing wrong in traffic,
Yeah.
right? But it's not worth my time. I don't care. I would rather you just go on your way and me go on mine and like we don't worry about it anymore. So I just stayed in my car and I just kept pointing at the green light and like waiting. And eventually he got back in his car and left, right? And then I was able to get through the light and it wasn't an issue, right?
Yeah.
In those scenarios, I think it's fine to be like, like fucking you're in the wrong, but I don't care right now. Like just go. Like I'm not going to escalate it, right?
Yeah.
I think it's different when it comes to murder and remorse.
I have no idea how I would have acted in that situation. Like, I don't know. Like, I've never.
Traffic stop?
No. And
Oh, got it.
as a father on, in the Jeffrey.
If someone
Dahmer
killed and
trial.
ate your mom, do you see any world where you forgive them?
I don't think I could.
Right.
Right. I don't think I have that willpower.
Unless it's a coping technique.
But I do see it as an example of someone who could forgive the unforgivable. And therefore, I can take that as a good example of me being able to forgive things that are really very forgivable, but I just choose not to.
Yeah, I think that's a
Right.
good lesson.
That's kind of like how the parallel works in my mind.
Right. It's scaling it down. It's saying like, hey, if this major scenario can be figured out, then this minor scenario can be figured out, right?
Yeah.
And I think at the minor level, that's a useful tool because, like, if you put it in perspective, you're like, dude, a traffic infraction is not a big deal, right? Murdering someone is a big deal. Like, if someone kills and eats your loved one, you have to give some serious thought into whether or not you're going to forgive that person, right? Ultimately, my feeling is forgiving someone for something like that is just to help you sleep at night. But in traffic, forgiving that person and letting go means that you can go about your day without it impacting you because it's not a big enough thing to actually impact your day, right? So by putting it in perspective, you're like, hey, I don't have to go through the moral conundrum of figuring out if I'm going to forgive this serial killer for killing my loved one because it's just a traffic infraction. So I can just move on with my day
Yeah.
and forget about it.
Yeah.
And that's a good technique.
Yeah.
I also have written here that self-reflection in regard to being hated is of vital importance because sometimes other people are correct or you're working in a gray area. So self-reflection can help define the situation, define societal norms, and figure out where you stand at your position and where others are, right? So like, I understand with this Reddit situation, upon self-reflection, the scenario is we're doing an interview and doing a background investigation. I'm aware that the societal norms are not to post on Reddit about, right? I'm aware that the other people in this scenario very closely adhere to societal norms and would be very uncomfortable with this Reddit post thing, right? And I understand that within that situation, I am an outlier in that I don't care about social norms. I care about whether or not it's actually usable, right? Like, am I going to collect valuable information? And I think so. So it's worth doing for me. And so I'm able to self-reflect there, right?
Right. One of the things I had written down, I wanted to give a little tidbit for something that's like a tool to use to help with this for the audience listening and whoever. Something that actually I wrote down some notes and then I spit it into ChatGPT and then I kind of bounced ideas off with ChatGPT about some of the topics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
One of the things it mentioned was creating a conflict map, which is like kind of like an idea that I wrote down to it, but I like couldn't put it into words. I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And essentially it would be where you consider one side from the other person's perspective, and then you consider your perspective and kind of write those two down, see how they mesh up, see what blends together,
Like a
right?
diagram.
See the differences and exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of try to understand where you may have gone astray, where they may have gone astray, right? And create that conflict map, Venn diagram, right? So that's something applicable, like a tool that you could use to help you self-reflect and understand whether the hatred you're receiving is deserved or not. And then also down here, kind of paired with that, in order to be able to do that effectively, you have to be able to listen and learn as well as, respond in a non-emotional manner and just to kind of take in, understand, absorb, analyze, and then go from there. Responding emotionally never leads to much of anything that's constructive.
Yeah. And I think for the Venn diagram, it's like there's a social, like an operating window for social norms, right?
Yeah.
And people typically prefer one end of the window or the other, right? And if you have to work with someone or in a situation in which you're dealing with someone who's on the opposite end of the window, it's important to recognize how far off the mark are you? Like in terms of each other's preferences, not only how far off this other guy's preference am I, but how far is he willing to move or accept someone else being off that mark?
Yeah.
right? So like when I'm dealing with you, I know that I can tell you that I disagree with everything that you say right now, and you're going to be open and receptive to it, or at the very least not hate me for it. Right?
Right.
But if I go to someone else who's like very locked into their perspective, one of the guys on the board, right? Like he's like, this is wrong, shouldn't have done it, fiduciary responsibility, right? I know that he's probably less willing to have a conversation about it,
Yeah.
less open-minded, much more emotionally charged, doesn't want to move very far off his mark, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to know, from my position specifically, how far away from that working window am I? Because I'm clearly out of his comfort range, right?
Yeah.
Am I on the side of the window that's actually unacceptable?
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you.
That's what I have for segment 2.
That is all that I have as well.
All right, segment 3. This is on how to conduct yourself through the hate. And I think that this segment is where I've seen the most growth in myself. And I honestly attribute a lot of it to Hormozy. In high school and early college, I really self-identified with the Ben Shapiro style of argument, like fast, factual, and kind of cynical. But as I grew, I started to learn more from Hormozy, and I realized that that style of argument is more about being heard and understood than it is about understanding the other person or even getting them to agree with you. It's more like informational spitting than it is like understanding or selling, right? And I think that Hormozy's background in sales helps with this. His lessons have taught me that a steady hand is more capable than any other. And where before I would respond to hatred with like insults, attitude, and valid claims to back my position, I'm right in those scenarios, I would now rather sidestep the insults hurled toward me and respond only with calm rationale supporting my position. And if applicable, I would ask the other party how their actions would have differed to mine or did differ to mine and understand their rationale. But to be honest, I think Hormozy says it best when he says, you will never be criticized by someone who is doing more than you. You will only be criticized by someone who is doing less than you.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of has a little bit of malleability to it because, like, for the example of the board, no one in that interview process did as much as me. I did more research into the background of this guy than anyone else, and
Yeah.
I'm receiving criticism for it. I don't think it's as a result of me doing more than them. I think it's as a result of me taking a direction they would not have gone.
Yeah.
So they could easily say, if I had done the research that you did, I would have gone a different direction, right? I don't think that I'm receiving the hate because I did it and they didn't. I think it's because I'm doing it in a way that they wouldn't have done it, right?
Yeah.
But I think as a broad argument, I think Hormozy makes a good point.
Yeah, and I think there's one other caveat to it too, is that if you're someone that's super, super successful and you have a friend who keeps saying that they want to start in business or entrepreneurship or go for this thing or whatever, and they just keep not doing it and screwing around with menial tasks
Yeah.
and stuff that doesn't matter,
Treasure.
like, yeah, you got to pass for the treasure hunt. It's cool. But like stuff like that. At a certain point, like that person who's already successful is going to turn to his friend who's just kind of still screwing around at the bottom, having no direction, and be like, dude, like,
Lock in.
come on, man. Like 4 hours of TikTok a day, like Netflix every single night. Like,
Yep.
come on, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like there are caveats to it, but I think overall, if you are from the perspective of someone who is successful or aiming to be successful, other people will, broadly speaking, hate you coming from a position that of less risk taking and just kind of pointing a finger at you, being like, why are you going over there and trying to do that and make something bigger, or like, you have all this now, what the heck, right? So
Well, and you could also consider, like, I try to narrow the options of people who hate me to people who aren't doing as much as me. Right? So I try to do so much, whatever I try to do so much in that area that I can only be criticized by people doing less than me because I'm doing more than most other people, right? So if I do receive criticism by someone doing more than me, I can probably hold it in reverence because they've gone through what I've gone through and done the work I've done. And they're the only one who's kind of experienced enough to say whether or not they think I'm doing it right, Um, so like with the rowing guy, with the technical thing, like with his back, opening his back, right? Doesn't take someone who has my rowing experience to recognize that that's an issue, right?
Yeah.
But if anyone were to disagree with me on it, it would have to be someone who probably has done more rowing than me and knows more than me, right? Or someone who maybe has done less than me but has more factual information, but I think that's less likely. So it's easier to say someone with more experience. But I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
So to round out this intro, how do you respond to hatred and has it changed over the course of your life?
Yeah, it definitely has changed. There were definitely points in time where I definitely responded really poorly to hatred, especially when I was young, defending my position without critically analyzing what the actual facts were of the situation.
Yeah.
Trying to just defend myself because I didn't want to be wrong. And over the course of time, I've kind of come to the conclusion that I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to do things right. And people are going to have inputs on both. And it's up to me to decide how they align with my values and beliefs and take the constructive criticism, even if it's not given to me in a form of constructive criticism, to take it as constructive criticism and understand how I apply it or don't apply it into my life and how I move forward.
Right.
I think that when I was younger, I definitely just aimed to defend my position regardless because I just didn't want to be wrong. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be wrong on this test or wrong about this political thought or whatever. Like, I just want to be right. I mean, I would just defend and defend and defend.
Yeah.
And as I've grown older, I think that everyone is going to be wrong about something and some stuff, and you just got to understand the reality of that we're all people and we're all making mistakes and we're all trying to do a little bit better, or a lot of us are trying to do a little bit better.
Yeah.
And
it's okay to be wrong.
It's okay. It's just fine to be wrong. Actually, I think Hormozy has this quote: "The more you fail, the higher your chances of success, because you inevitably will encounter failures along your path, and the more of those you encounter and conquer, the closer you get to success."
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I look at it.
Exactly. I think that's a good arc. That's a good growth arc.
Thanks. What do you got?
I think that though it's awesome to see witty comebacks, I've come to appreciate letting success speak for you. So I really, especially in high school, dude, I had like a number of insults like on hand, ready to go. A lot of them are in the quotes list that I keep, right?
Yeah.
Because I really loved seeing witty comebacks, right?
Yeah.
So here's a working example from Formula One. In 2023, Max pushed Leclerc off at turn 1 of the Las Vegas Grand Prix, right? Actually, not too dissimilar to turn 1 this weekend, but Max ended up getting a penalty. Anyways, so Max was on the inside of turn 1 at the Las Vegas Grand Prix. If I recall correctly, Leclerc actually put it on pole. I can't remember. So Max put it on pole, went up the inside, pushed Leclerc off the track, and then kept the position, right? Very clearly pushed Leclerc off the track. So as Max went down the road, this is 2023. He's won maybe 16 races so far this season. So he's already broken all these records, right? His team comes on the radio and they say, Max, they're giving you a 5-second penalty for that turn 1 incident. And Max goes, send them my regards. And then won the race by a fucking huge margin.
Yeah.
Even with the penalty, right? That's fucking baller. I love that shit, right? Probably wittier than I would do now. Probably cockier than I would do now. 100% something that I would say in high school, dude. The number of times that kids would say some shit to me and then I would say, I can't hear you from that far down the erg sheet is innumerable, right? But now a great example, this weekend, 2025 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, there was a lot of talk about which team Max would drive for in 2026 because Red Bull does not have the car anymore. They're too slow. He's gonna switch teams. Where's he gonna go? So everyone's asking Max, hey, we heard that Aston Martin's gonna offer you $300 million. Hey Max, the Mercedes engine's gonna be good. Where are you gonna go? Hey Max, do you think you could push out one of the McLaren guys? And Max said, why don't you guys focus more on commentating and let me focus about the driving?
Yeah.
And then he put it on pole in the 4th fastest car on the grid, right? And so it's less about the witty remark and it's more about just letting your success show. So Max didn't win. Usually I'm unhappy if Max doesn't win a race because I'm a big Max fan, right? But today I didn't have a problem with it because I really love Oscar Piastri because Oscar Piastri conducts himself like a fucking pro, right? No witty comments, no insults, nice guy, but who can get his head down and go racing, right? Doesn't yell, doesn't scream, doesn't, pop off. He's just level-headed. And I really appreciate that about him. And so I think that as I have grown in being hated, it's really easy to stoop to the haters level and hurl insults back at them. But I've come to value just letting it roll off your back, like water off a duck, and just letting your success speak for you.
Yeah. I think kind of some of those witty remarks also reflect a emotional response to an emotional accusation, right? Where it's someone comes at you with some hatred emotionally, and then you react emotionally and impulsively back at them with something maybe smarter and funnier than what they said. Right. But nonetheless, it's not breaking the situation down, listening and learning from it, self-reflecting, analyzing, and then moving on.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that fundamentally is a break from it's a deviation from how to address the situation ideally. To make witty comments is a deviation from that ideal response.
I agree. And I think I would have defaulted to that in the past. Like
Right.
in the
And,
group
and
chat.
I would have too.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are situations where, I definitely made a couple witty comments, and I think they're far and few between. For the most part, I think most of the witty comments I've made either like in confidence with someone personally,
Yeah.
or like to myself. Sometimes like I like making witty comments up in my head. You know what I mean? But yeah,
Like in this group chat when everyone was like slinging insults about me in the group chat without me saying anything, my first response was, well, I should respond. This woman said, he won't take the boast down because he's too arrogant.
yeah,
And I thought about writing in and saying, you know, I was gonna write the Dry Creek Dwayne definition for ignorance and breaking down how I'm not ignorant and defending my position and talking about why I think that it's actually a good thing and like maybe we should consider an ulterior route to what the social norms are and etc. And then I was like, oh, this is actually awesome because my response to being insulted is to explain myself rather than hurl an insult back or have a witty comment about how I'm not actually arrogant, right? And in the moment, my response was, okay, I'm going to explain my position rather than argue or insult. Whereas I think that 5 years ago, I would have broken down immediately and been like, hurled insults back at them.
I think sometimes the hardest part about dealing with hatred is when you listen, you absorb, and you understand, and you try to appreciate them bringing the thought to you, and also explain yourself, and they utilize the explanation as a tool against you.
Yeah.
Like I think that's when it becomes really, really hard, because it's like in a given situation, I open up to someone and I'm like, hey, like I understand your point. Like, thank you for bringing it up to me. Was my train of thought. And then they immediately take that train of thought and use it as a tool against me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, like it comes to a certain point where I'm like, hey, I'm trying to be honest with you. You are actively trying to be malicious with me.
Yeah.
Why? Like it gets to that point where I'm like, they have chosen not to explain themselves 2 or 3 times now, and have continued to insult me.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to ask you to explain yourself, because clearly you're not getting the read on the situation.
Yeah.
All right. And so I think that's where it becomes challenging. But by and large, those kinds of interactions are far and few between, I feel as though most of the time when I open up and try to be honest about something, the other person reciprocates. It's relatively rare when the other person continues to be closed off.
Well, and I think that's awesome because it's a great de-escalation tactic. Like
Yeah.
if someone opens up with hatred and then you respond with an argument like the Twitter wars, right? Like that's
Twitter
really
wars,
easy to hit back with a hatred, right?
Yeah.
But if someone opens up with an insult and then you're like, all right, what are we going to do about this problem? And then like it fizzles out. It's a dud.
Right.
It's like when Hermosi and his wife were walking around and that guy was like, move
Skinny
bitch.
Yeah.
And she was like, that guy called me skinny, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
if they were to have a conversation with that guy, he's probably more likely to be like, oh, sorry, or whatever, like move on with the conversation than double down and insult more. Because if someone else is acting with class and not letting your insults phase them and you continue to insult, like you start to crumble pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It degenerates very fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why they call them degens.
Yeah. But I think that the other couple things I have written on here is keep it goal oriented. When you're in these kinds of conversations, like, is the battle, if you got the perfect outcome from your perspective out of this conversation or given situation, would that battle be worth it?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you got the perfect outcome, because the perfect outcome is never going to quite be there. It's going to be some compromise to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Small or big. But like, even if you got the perfect outcome, is this worth your time and energy right now to like fight through this, or should you just absorb it and analyze it on yourself, right? And just like go from there and kind of work your way through, right? So just being strategic with your energy kind of also pairs with reducing your emotional response.
Yep.
Reducing the amount of emotion in your response pairs with, conserving your energy to tackle things that are more important than just, degen style argumental conversations. And through those conversations, it can sometimes, I've found it challenging to endure through them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've noticed it's helped me to kind of have the perspective of, I can endure through this. The time that this is happening is finite, and I can evolve from it later.
Yeah.
Right. And so just having that perspective of like, this time right now that you're in this challenging conversation kind of goes along with our challenging conversation podcast, isn't forever.
Yeah.
And you can push through this, use the skills you have, address it level-headedly, and then move on from there.
Yeah.
But that's kind of all like the strategic kind of like tool, tricks, tips that I have.
Who do you think will hate you next?
Um, that's a tough one. I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be someone. I don't know who specifically, but it's gonna be someone who probably maybe like at the bar or work, who has seen me kind of do just something a little bit different from the norm for quite a while now, in terms of like what I work on and what I do with my free time and like how I manage my time. Someone who's kind of seen what appears as though a small change in me for a while, and then suddenly like I'm able to quit my 9 to 5 and just do my business.
Right.
Right. And they're going to see that change as instantaneous, where it's come over the course of a long period of time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it'll be someone in one of those two groups who's like, that's unfair. You don't deserve that. I think that'll probably be the next person. I don't think I get out enough anymore to really like get into controversy too much.
Yeah.
You know, I'm pretty much at home most of the time. So
Yeah.
I think the only thing that hates me in my life right now is probably my cat if it gets past 10 a.m. and I haven't fed it yet. But yeah.
Dude, we feed the cats at night so that they shut up throughout the night. Because if
Oh,
I wake
yeah,
up to a
that's smart.
screaming cat, I fucking lose it. I think
Yeah.
that my whole day's ruined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what about you? Who do you think's gonna hate you next?
Well, I think most of the board hates me now. I think the guys I spoke with on the phone probably hate me more because I brought up a lot of points and I was very reserved, like I was calm in the conversation. And I think they were hoping that I would get like defensive and angry, but I didn't. So
Yeah.
maybe they're not the most happy with me right now. If they end up not hiring a coach and retaining Elizabeth as the interim coach, she'll probably hate me too. But I hope if that's the case, she reaches out to me so that she can, we can have a conversation about it. Fucking Misha hates me now, but doesn't know it yet. But if he sees this podcast, he'll probably hate me a lot. I wonder if you type in his name, if this podcast will come up.
Probably if you put his name in the description, it will.
I don't think I'll put his name in the
Yeah.
description, but if people watch the podcast,
I don't know. The AI analysis on YouTube is pretty crazy though. Like you can type in some stuff. Like I've been able to type in
yeah.
quotes from podcasts,
and it
and it pulls up the podcast.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Like like I'll just remember one line, and it'll pull up the podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa! Like it wasn't even in the description or the title.
It's just
It was like in a 5-second clip, 30 minutes in, and it still pulled it. I was like, that's wild.
Even if it does that though, the Reddit posts have so much traction. I think that'll be the first thing you find when you type in his name for a while.
Oh yeah.
For a while. And I feel bad to him for a certain extent, but also if you're gonna call someone a retard for expressing concerns about a child safe sport violation, then you can fuck yourself. So fuck off, Misha.
Yeah. He dug himself a hole.
He did.
He dug himself a hole. essentially.
Past that, I think that it's probably going to be a client at some point in the future with real estate. And I don't think it's going to be for an actual valid reason, because I am genuinely busting ass to try to make this deal work. And I am going to do so with all future deals, right? I'm not going to take a deal if I can't handle it, right? So I'm not going to take a client if I can't dedicate genuine time to them, right? So right now, I think Grace and I are crushing it. But Tyler had a client once who she was looking to buy a house. He helped her find one. They got an inspection done. She didn't want to bother getting the plumbing inspection done because it's like $400. She doesn't want to pay it. So she bought the house. And then 2 weeks later, a pipe burst. And so she went to Tyler's real estate brokerage and was like, "Where's Tyler Kerschel? This man needs to pay to fix my plumbing." And Tyler was like, "I'm your real estate agent. What are you talking about?" And she was like, "You sold me a lemon." And he's like, "I didn't sell you anything. I helped you find this house and you didn't want to do a plumbing inspection." And she was like, "Then you need to pay to like cover my mortgage." And he was like, "What the fuck?" Right? So I'm aware that there are crazy people out there. And Tyler didn't do anything wrong in that situation. I'm assuming that I'm going to run into that eventually anyways. But, with the level of effort that I'm putting into this current client that we're working, I should hope that I have enough evidence to back my claim in the future that I can clearly explain what's happening to a client.
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't think of this, but I think the most recent hatred I've had is from like random customers on my website.
Well, they
And
hate us anyway.
actually, no. By and large, they're actually people who have not purchased a product. I think actually all of the people who have come at me heatedly have not even purchased a product from the store and don't even have an order to fulfill.
What do they
They
complain about?
fill out the contact form complaining they haven't received the order and to refund me. And then they'll send me a screenshot of like a bank statement that doesn't match any of the pricing or charges that I've charged. Because I can see every single charge I've ever put on a customer. I can look
like
it
a
up by
scam.
number. Yeah, they're scamming me, right?
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get me to refund some card, redeem the gift card. You know what I mean?
Have you seen that? Have you seen that meme of like it's the dam and it's like the water is the Indian scammers and the village is millions of dollars and the dam is their accent?
Yeah.
They're circumventing the accent
Exactly that
with those scams. Yeah.
Dude,
Dude, I got the toll texts earlier this week. You know, everyone's been getting like you have an unpaid toll. I've never paid a toll in my life. I probably have a bunch of money that I have to pay the government.
I do.
Tolls.
I get those texts too, but I actually got a piece of mail from EasyPass, so now I gotta pay.
I got a phone call from a debt collector.
Whoa.
And when I typed in the name of the debt collection company, the first thing that came up was a Reddit post talking about how it's a scam.
Whoa.
And I'm like, awesome. I'm so glad that I didn't reach out to that company or deal with it at all, right? Because debt collection's serious. But, you know, I'm so happy that someone made a Reddit thread talking about these problems, and it's the first thing that comes up when they Google it. Just like everyone who's looking to work with Misha in the future, they pull up the Reddit thread.
Yeah. But cool, man. Well, that's all I got this week. You got to dial in.
I do. Can you guess who the quote is by?
Alex Hormozy.
It is. Okay. So the quote from Hormozy is, don't expect to be accepted if you want to be exceptional. To be exceptional, by definition, you are the exception. And that ties in with hatred.
Yeah.
Because people aren't going to hate you for fitting in. People are going to hate you for stepping outside the box. And you have to be accepting of that if you want to do something outside the box.
Yep. 100%.
That's all I got.
Well, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.